When I was a junior in college, I lived in this old dorm building about 2 miles from campus that everyone called the poor kids' apartments. The neighborhood wasn't great, and we'd been having break-ins lately, so I was always careful about who I let through the security door. That Thursday evening around 7, I was coming back from my sociology lecture and planning to grab some clothes before driving to my aunt's place for the weekend. I worked near her house, so I usually stayed there on weekends anyway. As I approached the elevator, someone was already holding the door open for a small group of students. I noticed right away that one of the people he'd let in didn't look like he belonged there at all. He was maybe mid-30s, wearing a wrinkled shirt and beat-up jeans, and just looked really out of place among all us college kids. Most people weren't paying attention to him, but something about the whole situation felt wrong to me. I swiped in, heard the lock click, and stepped past the mailboxes. The lobby was small and worn out. Beige tiles, a corkboard with flyers, a faint bleach smell from a wet mop. The metal door thudded shut behind us. I kept my tote tight to my side and checked the guy again. No campus badge, scuffed shoes. He let everyone else crowd ahead of him like he wanted to be last. We spilled into the elevator. The panel had worn numbers and a broken plastic cover over the alarm. The floor was sticky near the back. A girl with a huge backpack squeezed in beside me. 2 guys in hoodies kept talking about a quiz. The older guy stood near the buttons but farther back than you'd stand if you planned to press one. His hands stayed in his pockets. He watched the numbers above the door. We started up with a jolt. Someone leaned past him and hit 3. Somebody else hit 5. I pressed 8. He didn't press anything at all. He didn't even look down at the panel like he was thinking about it. That was my first red flag. We stopped at 2 and a couple of people got out. The doors slid shut. The car felt tighter. In the reflection on the brushed metal, I could see his eyes on me now. Steady, not shy. I turned my foot a little so my heel was set to pivot and rested my free hand on the rail. At 3 more stepped off. The doors closed again and the hum filled the space. I could hear his breathing. Slow. Even. He still hadn't moved toward the buttons. He stood between me and the panel now, which meant if I needed door open in a hurry, I would have to reach past him. We passed 4 without stopping. I tried to give him normal reasons to be there. Visiting a friend? Delivering something? Lost? He had no bag, no envelope, no food, no slip of paper with a number on it. Our RA had emailed twice that week about tailgaters and asking us to report anyone who watched the doors from the sidewalk. I thought about that email and kept my face blank. At 5, a kid with headphones stepped out without looking at either of us. The doors closed and the car lurched a little. I squared my shoulders and took a slow breath. I counted the distance to the stairwell on my floor. I pictured the hallway layout and the camera above the light that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. The display ticked to 6. A clank came from the shaft, and then quiet again. The older guy shifted. He squared himself too. He knew that I had clocked him. His mouth pulled tight like he had a line ready and then decided against it. The fists in his pockets looked hard. At 7, the doors opened a few inches, paused like they always did, then opened all the way. The hall there was empty. He didn't move. He stared at the gap, then back at me. The doors slid shut. I could smell old sweat on his shirt and generic laundry soap, the kind from our basement machines. I had to think fast. He hadn't pressed a floor. He'd gotten in before me and stayed quiet. He didn't belong here. The RA stories about people following students stacked in my head. I slid my keys between my fingers and pulled my tote strap tight across my chest. My phone stayed in my coat pocket. In a moving box, movement mattered more than calls. The panel dinged for 8. My floor. Stairwell to the right. Long corridor left to my room. A raised seam after the first turn always caught my shoe if I wasn't careful. Small details help me picture angles. If he went left, I'd go right to the stairs. If he went right, I'd go left. The car slowed. The doors began to open. He shifted toward the gap like he wanted the first move. Fine. Better he was in front where I could see him. I leaned back, gave him space, and kept my eyes on the glowing 8. He stared once. I looked past him at the gray carpet. Everything was quiet. No voices in the hall. The door sensors whined, then the panels split all the way. My knees stayed loose. My hand tightened on my keys. My foot angled toward the stairwell. I kept my face straight. He hesitated for a beat, then leaned forward like he might talk. I stayed still and did not look at him. The elevator hum felt louder. The hallway smelled like dust. A flyer by the stairwell had a curled corner. I inventoried things. I decided I'd let him get out first and see which way he went. That way I could run the opposite direction and get to my room safely. I got my keys ready in my hand and pretended to be looking for something in my backpack. The elevator doors finally opened all the way, and he stepped out first. He hesitated with his feet on the threshold, turned his head left, then right, like he didn't know where he was going. Then he went left, slow, hands still in his pockets. That was perfect because my room was to the right and close to the elevator. I didn't wait to think. I sprinted right. 3 doors down. The carpet grabbed at my shoes. I had the key already pointed, slid it into the lock, twisted, shouldered the door, stepped in, and kicked it shut. I locked the deadbolt, the top chain, and set the door bar we used when we were home. My room smelled like laundry and old coffee. I backed up 2 steps and went to the peephole. Through the fisheye, the hall curved a little. The elevator doors had closed. He was in view down the left side, out by someone's door, not knocking, just standing there and staring straight back toward my direction like he was trying to see through wood. His head tilted once. He didn't move for a long 10 seconds. I stayed still and watched breathing through my mouth. I grabbed what I needed for the weekend fast: tote, charger, work shirt, black flats, toothbrush, 1 textbook. I zipped the bag and stuffed it with my hoodie on top to hide the nicer things. I kept checking the peephole between each step. He hadn't knocked anywhere. He was still planted by that door with his shoulders rounded like he was resting. I tried to convince myself maybe he waited for someone to open up. Maybe a friend was slow. The hallway stayed quiet. No doors opened. No voices. No movement besides him shifting his weight. The second hand on my desk clock clicked, and I realized I was counting it. Deep down, I knew this was bad. It wasn't how visitors behaved here. I slid my phone into my coat pocket and put my keys in my palm again. I checked the peephole one more time before leaving my room again. I waited until his head turned the other way, then undid the chain and the deadbolt, opened the door 6 inches, and listened. Nothing. I stepped out and pulled the door shut, locked it behind me, and moved for the elevator fast but quiet. I hit the button and kept my shoulder toward the hallway left, not giving him a full view of my face. When the elevator dinged, I got in and hit lobby, then hit door close 3 times. About 15 minutes later, I made sure the coast was clear and headed back to the elevator. It hummed down, stopping once on 6, then again on 3. I shifted my bag on my shoulder and kept my thumb on my phone screen. The ride felt slow. I watched the numbers like they were going to stall. When the doors opened in the lobby, I stepped forward and then froze. That same guy was right there, sliding sideways to get into the car with a completely new group of students coming in from outside. Different faces, backpacks, winter coats, the smell of cold air. He had the same pockets, same blank eyes. The moment he saw me, his eyes went wide, like he didn't expect to see me again. Surprise first, then something tight, like worry. Now I knew for sure he didn't live here. He was just riding up and down, using students to get past locks and cameras. I pulled my phone out because I couldn't let him keep wandering. My thumb hovered over 911. My mouth was dry. I didn't want to yell. The new group kept talking and didn't notice us looking at each other. Before I could make the call, I almost bumped into Marcus, the evening security guard, coming back in from the vestibule with a clipboard in his hand. He had his radio on his shoulder and a big ring of keys. "You good?" he asked. I told him fast. I said the man never pressed a floor, stayed on as people got off, watched me. Then I saw him again with new people. I pointed, but the guy had already pivoted his body behind two tall students like he wanted a shield. Marcus listened while he looked over the group. He asked, "Which one?" I said, "Wrinkled shirt, jeans, no student ID." The guy made the smallest move to turn away from Marcus's eyes, but it was too late. Marcus's jaw worked once. He nodded. Marcus told me I did the right thing by reporting it. He didn't waste time. He reached for his radio and called the police, gave our address, told them to stage in the parking lot and wait for his signal. He kept his voice flat and calm. He said they'd gotten reports about suspicious people before, men who hung back and trailed residents to learn door codes and routines. He said this sounded like someone casing apartments for break-ins. I stepped to the side so I wasn't blocking the lobby camera. I kept my bag tight and my back to the wall near the mailboxes. The group from outside all filed in, laughing, pressing buttons, not seeing any of it. The guy didn't try to get into the elevator that round. He hung back near the bulletin board like he was reading a flyer. His eyes came up and brushed over me, then snapped away as soon as Marcus shifted closer. Marcus told me to wait by the front desk. He said if I needed to go, he'd walk me to my car after. He didn't say, "Don't move," but I didn't plan to move. He gave me a small nod like, "Stay put." Then he went upstairs to try to find the intruder, using the stairs so he could watch the landings and not get stuck in a box. The lobby went quiet again when the elevator doors closed. I could hear the hum of the vending machine and the buzz of the exit light. My phone screen stayed open to the dialer. I stared at the glass in the front door and saw patrol car lights in the lot a few minutes later, turned off and just idle, like he'd asked. I never found out what happened after that because I didn't see Marcus again before I graduated. I always wondered if they caught the guy, or if he saw me talking to security and took off before they could find him. Part of me felt bad that I hadn't acted sooner. What if he targeted another student while I was upstairs getting my stuff? But I'm glad I trusted my instincts about the whole situation. It taught me to always pay attention when something feels off, especially when it comes to building security and personal safety. When I was 15, back in 2005, MySpace was everything to us teenagers. I came home from school, dropped my backpack by the door, and went straight to the family computer in the corner of our living room. The tower hummed loud. The screen had a little scratch where my cousin once hit it with a pencil. I logged in, changed my song, scrolled my top 8, and watched the comments pile up. It felt like a small city that only lived inside that blue and white page. One afternoon, a friend request popped up from a 22-year-old guy named Brad from Texas. His profile had a photo of him leaning on a truck, hat backward, bright sun on the hood. He messaged me first. He asked about school, what music I liked, if I was into sports. He said I seemed chill. He typed fast, long paragraphs, no emojis, just a lot of questions and little jokes. It felt grown up. It felt like someone was paying attention. He asked for a picture of me. I didn't have any good photos. Our old camera was broken and I hated the ones my friends took. So I searched for an actress online, someone with long dark hair and a nice smile. I saved 3 photos and sent them to him like they were mine. He typed back right away that I was beautiful. I watched the typing bubble blink and then pop back up again and again. He said I looked mature. After that, he got more personal. He asked how old I was. I told him 15, and his reply took a second longer. Then he sent, "Age is just a number. You seem older." He said he liked how I wrote. He said I understood him. I felt a little rush in my chest. I told myself it was not a big deal. It was just chat. I turned the monitor down when I heard the garage door, closed the window if anyone walked behind me. Little things like that became normal. I kept the lie going. I sent him more photos of the same actress, different angles, different clothes. He asked where I lived. I told him the state and the name of my town, but not my street. He asked what time I got home from school. I said it changed a lot. He asked if I had a cell phone. I didn't then, so he suggested Yahoo Messenger. We added each other. The first time his call tone rang, I jumped. He said my typing sounded confident. He said I was funny. He told me I made his day after work. He told me about his job changing tires and unloading deliveries. He said it was rough on his back. He told me about late-night drives on empty highways, windows down, country radio low. He asked me what I wanted to do when I finished school. I said I didn't know. He said not to worry. You'll figure it out. He liked hearing about my math teacher who wore the same tie every Tuesday. He laughed at my story about the soda exploding in the cafeteria. He said it felt like he knew me. He started calling me mature. He used that word a lot. If I didn't answer right away, he'd send another, "You there?" and then a busy. He said other girls his age were dramatic and fake. He said I was real. He liked that I stayed up late to talk. He liked that I didn't gossip. When I typed goodnight, he'd send one more line, "Sweet dreams." I turned off the monitor and listened to the fan wind down, the house settling, the ice maker clicking in the freezer. It felt like secrets lived in those sounds. I noticed how I sat at the screen with my shoulders tight. I noticed how I locked my bedroom door when I was on the laptop my mom borrowed from work. I noticed how I cleared the history and wiped the mouse with my sleeve. If he asked something I didn't want to answer, I joked and changed the subject. He never got angry, but the questions came back later, like he bookmarked them. He asked what mall I went to. He asked which bus I took. He asked what days my parents were home. My parents worked late. My mom did evening shifts at the clinic. My dad took extra hours at the warehouse. Dinner was leftovers most nights, or cereal. They asked if homework was done, and then went to bed early. They didn't know what MySpace was, not really. The old Dell was my space and more than just name. Brad learned that fast. He'd message after school like clockwork. He'd say, "How's my girl?" He'd say, "Tell me about your day." The more he typed, the less I talked to people in the room with me. Over the next few months, Brad and I talked every single day after school. It became a routine. Backpack down, laptop open, notification ping, his name bold at the top of the list. He liked to hear about small things. The new vending machine, the gym smell after PE, the rain coming down yellow under the parking lot lights. He said those details made him feel close. He sent me photos of gas stations on long stretches of highway, late-night receipts with his name on them, a blurry selfie in a mirror. I sent more actress photos and jokes about homework. He kept telling me how special I was. He said he had never met anyone like me. He wrote long messages about how people didn't understand him, but I did. He said I was safe. He said he could tell me anything. He told me about a fight he had with his manager and how he almost quit. He said he only stayed because he didn't want to mess up our chats. He typed, "I think I love you." I stared at the words, the blinking cursor waiting for me to answer. He sent another line. I do. I love you. My parents were always busy with work and never paid much attention to what I was doing online. I ate in front of the computer sometimes, spoon in one hand, typing with the other. I told myself I was grown now. 15 going on 25, at least on the screen. I liked the look of it. He made it feel like I had this private lane where cars moved fast and nobody else merged. When he said we were in a real relationship, the word hit me hard, like a door closing and a lock turning. Brad started saying he loved me out loud on the mic. He said the words slow, almost like he wanted me to hear each letter. He talked about the future as if it was a map we'd already printed. He said we would do a road trip. He said he could teach me to drive better. He said he wasn't like guys at my school. He said they were boys. He said he was a man and he would take care of me. Then Brad told me he got a new job only 2 hours away from my town. He sent a photo of a highway sign I recognized. He sent a screenshot of a map with a red pin not far from places I knew. He said it was fate. He said the timing was perfect. He said it was meant to happen this way. My fingers went cold on the keyboard. He asked what weekends I was free. He asked if I liked burgers or pizza. He asked which movie theater was better. He said meeting would make things real. He said he had waited long enough. He told me I was ready, that I was mature, that I could make my own choices. He started sending times. Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, after school on a weekday, just for an hour. He said he could wait across the street if I felt weird. He said he could park behind the grocery store. He said we could just talk. He called it fate again. He said it was a sign. He said, "We're so close now." He told me to trust him. He told me not to overthink. He said he didn't sleep much because he kept picturing me walking toward him. Every day he asked the same thing, careful at first, then more direct, then just one line on the screen, waiting for me to type back. He kept asking when we could finally meet in person. Brad suggested we meet at a popular cafe in the mall during the day when lots of people would be around. He said noon on Saturday, by the big fake palm tree near the fountain. The cafe had glass walls and a bright menu board. Moms with strollers sat there all the time. Security guards walked past every 10 minutes. It sounded safe. My hands shook a little while I typed yes. I was nervous, but excited about finally meeting what I thought was my boyfriend. I told my best friend Alyssa everything about Brad and asked if she'd come with me for support. She agreed right away. We picked clothes that looked normal, not flashy. We planned to sit where cameras could see us. We set up check-in calls with her mom every 30 minutes. I kept telling myself nothing bad could happen there. I was convinced I could handle the whole situation myself. I knew the layout of that mall, from the shoe store that smelled like rubber to the arcade blinking in the corner. The cafe kept a stack of napkins by the register and metal chairs that scraped on the tile. We even planned an exit if anything felt off. Alyssa would text a code word. We would walk to the bookstore and ask for help. On the day we were supposed to meet, Alyssa's mom picked us up from school earlier than usual. The sky was flat gray and the car smelled like coffee. We buckled in and threw our backpacks on the floor. She merged onto the main road like always. Then she said she had been reading our text messages about the plan. Her voice was calm but final. She said we were not going to the mall. I started talking fast, trying to explain the cafe, the cameras, the people. I said we would sit by the glass. I said we would not go anywhere else. She kept driving. She repeated that we were not meeting some strange adult man. I felt hot and then cold. I said he was nice. I said we were just going to talk in public. She said public places are where men shop for victims. Alyssa stayed quiet, staring out the window. Her mom explained she was worried I could get seriously hurt or kidnapped. She said men like that push boundaries slowly and then fast. She said no meeting. Not today. Not ever. She offered a deal. She would not tell my parents if I promised never to contact Brad again and never plan meetings with internet strangers. She asked for my word and waited. I looked at Alyssa and nodded. My voice came out small. I promised. Her mom turned off at the next exit, away from the mall. We drove past the big sign with the movie posters and the carousel horses painted on the wall. She dropped me at my house and watched me walk to the door. I went straight to the computer and stared at the empty chat window like it might blink. Brad actually showed up at the cafe and waited for almost 2 hours for me to arrive. He sent me a photo of the fountain and the palm tree with the time in the corner. He said he was at the table in the back, alone with a cold coffee. Messages came fast after that. He asked where I was. He asked if I was playing games. He said I was embarrassing him. When it became clear I wasn't coming, he started sending really angry messages through MySpace. He called me a liar and a tease for wasting his time. He said I'd made him drive for nothing. He said I owed him gas money. The tone changed from soft to sharp. He wrote short lines with no punctuation, one after another. The green light by my name made him madder. I clicked it off. His messages became threatening as he said he knew my school and could find my house. He listed nearby streets and landmarks he had asked me about before like it was a test. He said my town wasn't big. He said people talk. He told me not to ignore him. He said he was outside now, which was a lie, but it still made the room feel smaller. I closed the blinds. I was shocked by how quickly he transformed into someone completely different. The man who said I was special was gone. The new version used my name like a weapon. He typed it over and over. He sent longer messages, then deleted them and sent worse ones. He pointed out the days my parents worked late, which I had told him without thinking. He said weekends were better for surprises. I logged out. After a few days of nasty messages, I woke to find his profile blank. The photo was gone, and the name had changed to numbers. Old messages still sat in my inbox like trash bags nobody picked up. I clicked through them without opening. I set my profile to private and removed my town from the header. I changed my display name, deleted photos, and turned off comments. The page felt stripped bare. Alyssa called me from her kitchen and asked if I was okay. I told her I had kept the promise. She said her mom was serious and would check in again. I kept the computer in the living room and only used it when someone else was around. I watched the front window at night anyway, counting cars that passed. The house sounded different for a while. Even the hum of the fridge changed. Then Brad suddenly disappeared and deleted his profile. The messages stopped mid-sentence like a radio cut. I took my name off every app I could remember. I blocked his email, his messenger, and his old handles. I blocked every way he could contact me and never heard from him again. It happened last summer when my family rented this cabin in the Appalachian Mountains for a long weekend getaway. We'd found this really secluded place surrounded by thick forest, maybe half a mile from the nearest neighbor. My husband Dan, 12-year-old son Ethan, and I were looking forward to some peace and quiet away from the city. The other cabins in the area seemed to be empty, which was perfect for the kind of relaxing trip we had in mind. We could hear a dog barking somewhere in the woods occasionally, but we figured it belonged to some campers we couldn't see. On Saturday night around 11, Ethan called from the neighboring cabin where he'd set up his sleeping bag, asking me to bring him his forgotten jacket. It was really dark out there with no streetlights at all, so I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight. The walk between cabins was maybe 50 yards on a dirt path through the trees. There were no signs, no reflectors, just dirt and roots, and the pale boards of 2 porches. Crickets stopped when I stepped off the porch. The trees crowded really close. My light shook with each step. It was very quiet. I slipped on my boots and a hoodie over my pajamas and stepped onto the porch. The boards were rough, and a nail sat high near the second plank, so I lifted my toe over it. The flashlight threw a beam that caught the white stripe of the path. The air smelled like wet leaves and cold ash. I kept my phone in my pocket even though I knew the way. The dog barked once, then again farther out. Nothing moved on the path except a small frog that jumped toward the ditch. The dirt was firm in the middle and soft near the edges. Roots rose like knuckles and I stepped over them. Someone had stacked 3 flat rocks beside a stump to mark where the ground dipped. The neighboring cabin sat back from the path with its porch rail leaning. Ethan's lamp glowed through thin curtains. The door was light pine with a brass latch that clicked if you didn't guide it. I kept the light down and knocked. Ethan opened fast. His sleeping bag was unrolled on a cot, booklight clipped to a paperback. He asked for his jacket because he felt a draft. I handed it to him and checked the window where he pointed. The latch was stiff, and the frame had a swollen spot. I slid the latch down, pressed the frame, and it settled. I set his sneakers by the door and tucked his backpack under the cot. He asked if the dog would bark all night. I told him to keep his earbuds near and to sleep with the jacket zipped. I told him to call if anything felt off. I switched off the booklight and left the lamp at its lowest setting. I pulled the door until the latch caught and started back. The darkness felt thicker walking away from his light. The flashlight showed the next 20 feet and then only shapes. I heard a quick chain rattle, then it was quiet. The dog barked again, but shorter, and then a whining sound that cut off. I kept the beam low and moved faster. A faint gasoline smell came from the left side of the path, then faded. I aimed the light there and saw only ferns and a cut stump. In the dust, I noticed narrow tire tracks pressed over my boot prints. They curved toward the service road. I didn't remember hearing an engine. I kept going. Inside our cabin, Dan had a kettle steaming and a deck of cards stacked straight. He asked if everything was okay. I said the window was secure, told him about the gasoline smell and the tracks, and set the flashlight on the counter. He said maybe a ranger checked the sights or someone hauled firewood late. I locked the door, dropped the deadbolt, and set a dining chair near the side door. We charged our phones near the front window where the service showed 2 bars. The power had flickered earlier when the fridge cycled, so we kept the lantern ready. We drank tea and listened. No music, no cars, no voices. I watched the gap in the curtain and counted seconds between dog barks. After we rinsed the cups, I checked the lock again. The deadbolt turned smooth. I moved our shoes into a line and slid the cooler closer to the side door. Dan pushed the trash can in front of the back door for raccoons. We turned off the brighter lamp and left the small one on low. The cabin settled with tiny pops. I took the flashlight with me to the bathroom and set it back on the counter. The dog barked once, far now, like it was on the road. On my way back from delivering the jacket, I started hearing this whistling sound coming from somewhere in the forest. It sounded kind of like someone calling for a dog, but the pattern was weird, not consistent like you'd expect from a person looking for their pet. I shined my flashlight around into the trees but couldn't see anybody out there. I heard it a couple more times and figured someone's dog had gotten loose and they were trying to call it back. About 30 minutes later, Ethan called again, saying he couldn't settle down with all the noise from the other campers and wanted to come back to our cabin. Dan and I walked over together to collect him and his stuff. As we were walking back, we heard the same whistling again, this time multiple times in a row. The notes came in short bursts, then a longer one, then a pause. It seemed to be coming from the dirt road ahead of us, gradually moving away into the distance. Dan commented that the dog must have gotten loose and the owner was out looking for it with a whistle. Back in our cabin, we kept hearing that same sound every few minutes, but now I started noticing a pattern. It would start out really loud and close, like it was right next to our cabin. Then it would gradually get quieter as it moved away, until it completely faded out. But then a couple minutes later, it would start up again from the opposite direction, getting louder as it passed by our cabin, then fading away again. It kept happening, slow and steady, like someone pacing a marked loop. I set Ethan's duffel on the rug and folded his shirts into flat stacks. The dryer had left everything warm and a little stiff. Zippers clicked when I shifted the bag. I listened and counted in my head. It was almost the same gap each time. I timed one full pass on the stove clock. It was about 4 minutes from loud to quiet to loud again on the other side. The dog barked once, faint, like far down the road, and then nothing. The kettle clicked as it cooled. The loft fan ticked once each turn. Dan called down that he was going to try to sleep. I told him I'd finish the kitchen and pack the car in the morning. I kept the porch light off so the cabin stayed dark. I wanted my eyes adjusted if I had to look out. The blinds near the front door had one bent slat from someone pressing it before. A thin line of night showed through like a little river. The whistling rose to the left, crossed slowly across the front, then faded to the right. I paused with socks in my hands and waited for footsteps that never came. I slid Ethan's earbuds into the outer pocket so he could find them. I placed his book on top of the clothes and zipped the bag halfway so the tab wouldn't rattle. I filled 2 water bottles at the sink and set them by the couch. I walked to the bathroom and checked the small window above the tub. It was open a finger width, so I closed the latch and pressed the frame until it set. The room smelled like cleaner. The whistle came again, closer now. I went back to the front and sat under Ethan's window to listen. My phone sat on the couch cushion. 2 bars, then 1, then none. The battery showed 60%. No alerts. I drafted a text with our cabin address, and then deleted it because I had nothing to say except a feeling. I slid the chain lock into place even though the deadbolt was already turned. I nudged the chair tighter against the side door. The whistle grew clearer, almost under the porch, and then fell away again to the right like a slow tide. I kept packing with small movements, no extra noise, eyes on the door and the window. I was sitting by Ethan's window quietly folding his clothes when the whistling came around again. But this time, instead of fading as it passed by, it got incredibly loud and stayed right there, like whoever was making the sound had stopped directly outside his window. Even though the blinds were down, I was absolutely convinced I could make out the silhouette of a person standing on our front porch. I jumped up and ran to the front door, flinging it open and hitting the porch light switch. I was ready to tell off whoever was playing pranks on us, but nobody stood there. The boards and rail were empty in the hard yellow light. The steps showed mud stains in the corners. The path was just a pale track and black trees. I held my flashlight low and stepped to the edge of the porch, listening for breathing or shoes on gravel. Nothing. I clicked the light off and stood still so I wouldn't blind myself. The porch light hummed through the wall. After a few seconds, the whistle came again from behind the cabin, short notes, and then a longer one. It sounded close, quick, like someone had moved fast. I shut the door, locked it, and pressed my ear to the wood. No footsteps, no crunch, just the quiet after the notes. I went to Ethan's window and lifted the blind a finger width. The porch was empty. The path lay gray, trees crowding in. A moth tapped glass and fell. I dropped the blind and checked the kitchen door even though we never used it. The top hinge squeaked when I touched the handle. It was locked. I pulled the trash can back against it and slid the cooler close so they'd make noise if bumped. I went around the cabin closing and latching every single window and pulled down all the blinds too. If someone was creeping around outside, I didn't want them able to look in at us from the darkness. I decided I wasn't comfortable leaving Ethan alone downstairs, so I settled onto the couch with a book to keep watch. The whistling continued circling our cabin for hours, I'd try to convince myself between sounds that it must be some kind of night bird, but then I'd hear it again and be absolutely certain it was human. The loop held, the same 4 minutes, over and over. I watched the time creep past midnight. The book stayed open in my lap so I looked like I was reading, but I was just tracking that slow circuit. Around 1:30, Dan came down the stairs fast, grabbed his jeans, and pulled on his boots. He said he was going to go find whoever was out there and ask them what they thought they were doing. I stood and said no. I told him the pattern was deliberate and walking into it blind made no sense. He stopped, breathing hard, and sat beside me. The whistling finally stopped sometime after 2 a.m., but I have no idea who was out there or what they wanted from us. So when I was 19, I was driving home to Oregon for spring break through the Nevada desert. The drive was long and flat, just black road and cold air. Around midnight, I saw a hitchhiker standing alone, thumb out. I pulled over because I was raised to help people. He climbed in slowly and said his name was Ray. Thin, dusty work clothes, tired face, cracked hands. From the beginning, something about him felt off, like a noise you barely hear and think is nothing. But I figured I was just tired from the long drive and imagining things. My car smelled like old coffee. A folded paper map stuck in the door. A cracked phone cable swung near the shifter. I told him I was a college student headed home to Eugene. He nodded, rubbing his forehead with his palm, eyes moving like he was scanning for threats. The highway was a flat gray ribbon. The desert on both sides looked empty and cold. I cracked the window and let the air whistle along the mirror. The radio was static and a preacher. Ray watched the road like I did, but didn't blink much. His knee started bouncing. He tried the passenger lock once and it clacked without moving. He smiled a little testy smile and looked away. His boot heels stayed lifted, ready. His knuckles had old scabs, nails cut short, a thin scar across the wrist. He asked the time. He said late, softly into darkness. The gas gauge sat under half. I thought about stopping at the next lights I saw and stretching, but the next lights never came. A pair of hazards blinked far behind, then disappeared. Semis burst past from the opposite lane and shook my car. Ray counted them silently under breath. Ray said his car broke down about 30 miles back and he needed a ride to town. Then he changed direction and started talking about attacks on drivers out here. He knew robberies and murders like case files. Names, exits, times, even weather. Way too many specifics for comfort tonight. I tried to steer him back to small talk. He slid a multi-tool from his pocket and began opening and closing pieces like he was bored. Pliers snapped. A little saw clicked out and in. The movement was casual, but every sound felt loud in the car to me now. He told a story about a couple who ran out of gas near an old rest stop, and he said the exit number without blinking. The boyfriend walked away and never returned. The girl got picked up by a driver who stopped behind her with lights off. He paused once. His voice stayed flat, like reading directions. He said a smart guy would kill the lights first, park nose out, keep the hood up, and make it look helpful. He rested the knife on his jeans without touching, then clicked it shut and open, like thinking about better timing always. He looked at the glove box and asked what I kept in there. I said registration. He asked if he could check. I said no. He gave a short laugh through his nose and flipped another blade out, like that had been a formality, not a question. Then resumed talking. He talked about a robbery at a scenic pullout with a faded map sign slashed with graffiti. He remembered the backpack brand and where the phone was later found. He said the thief parked wrong and boxed himself with rocks. Better to angle out, tire tracks hidden after rainstorms. He told me a pickup was found burned in a wash. Investigators missed the tire prints under ash because they didn't understand how rain pooled there. He traced a circle on his knee with the dull blade. 2 days, he said. The cards still run till Monday, if careful always. He asked if I ever sleep at truck stops. I said no. He explained how 2 cars box you in and a third noses up to your bumper. He showed angles with the tool like a pointer, drawing invisible parking lots. No gun, he said. No noise, just fast work. The preacher on the radio asked for donations again. I turned the volume down to 0. Ray watched my hand on the knob and smiled without teeth. The blade flashed thin and straight in the dash light. His knee bounced and stopped, then bounced again, like a metronome in time. A green sign said the next town was still 50 miles. My shoulders tightened and my hands stayed dry on the wheel. Ray said a blind curve was best. Sprinkle glass, hear a tire pop, then stop with the hood up so people feel safe easing behind you at night. He glanced at the glove box again and asked what else I kept there. Registration and nothing else, I said. He asked to see it, almost polite. I said no. He nodded like he understood and kept flipping tools open and shut, each click a tiny hammer in my ears. He described a method where 2 cars boxed a man while a third blocked the front. You don't even need a gun, he said. Take the distributor cap, take the keys, take the shoes, take the phone. Takes minutes. People sit by the road until morning like furniture out there. I said I didn't want to hear more. He nodded like he heard me and kept going anyway. His tone had shifted into a lesson. Low, steady, patient. He held the blade level over his thigh without touching down, opening and closing other bits as he explained efficiency for criminals. He said the smart ones never hurt anyone unless they had to, and the dumb ones made messes and got caught. The tool kept clicking under his thumb, opening and closing, while he laid out simple steps a person could follow to be more effective at night. A thin row of lights appeared, and then a low building with 2 pumps and a dead soda machine outside. I slowed in, rolled past the window, and saw a single clerk under fluorescent lights. A rack of chips, a coffee corner, 2 dome cameras up in the corners. This was my exit. I told Ray I needed gas and that I'd pay inside. My plan was simple. Leave him, call the police, and wait with other people around. I pulled next to the pump, killed the engine, and took my card out. I'll run in and pay, I said, keeping my voice flat. Ray opened his door too. He stepped out with the multi-tool in his hand, not open, but in his palm, like a habit. I'll grab coffee, he said. My plan fell apart right there. We walked to the door together. The glass was dusty and the metal handle greasy. He held the door and stayed half a step behind me so he could see what I was doing. I scanned the aisles. The clerk was young and bored, scrolling on a phone, the kind who looks up slow. The cameras were old bubbles with spiderweb cracks. Ray stayed close, shoulder almost touching mine. I stared at the counter. I needed 10 seconds by a phone or a bathroom. Ray's reflection was behind my shoulder in the cooler glass. The blade wasn't out, but his thumb rubbed the hinge of the tool without stopping. I pointed at the coffee station. Go ahead. I forgot my wallet in the car, I said. I kept my face blank. He didn't move at first. He studied me, then the door, then the clerk. He stepped forward, slow, and pushed the door back open. He stood in the doorway, holding it with his shoulder, and watched me. The metal chime sounded. He kept 1 foot inside and 1 foot out, like he could spring either way. I walked steady back to my car, not running. I felt the cold in my ears. The pump display scrolled instructions and waited. I opened the driver door, sat down, and closed it. He was still in the doorway, eyes locked on me. The clerk didn't look. I put the key in, turned it, and the engine fired. Ray took one step out. I put the car in drive. He moved then. I pressed the gas, and the car lunged. The tires thumped the crack at the edge of the lot. In my mirror, I saw Ray break into a run. The multi-tool was open now, a bright line in his fist. He shouted something, voice tearing in the wind. I didn't look back a second time. I hit the access road and pushed the pedal flat. He ran out past the pumps, knife ready, and chased after the car, shouting for me to come back. The store light stuttered over his face. He faded in the mirror with the sign and the soda machine. I kept straight, merged hard, and watched only forward. The highway swallowed everything after that. The nearest town sat in a valley with a motel row and a brown building with a badge sign. I went straight to the police station. The lobby was cold and had a glass window with a speaker slot. I told the desk officer what happened and the name he gave me. I kept my description simple. I said he had a knife open in the store and wouldn't let me move alone. An older officer came to the counter, took notes, and asked where. He told me to follow in my car so I could pay for the gas with him there. We went back in a black and white with a light bar that hummed. I kept my speed under the limit. Every set of headlights behind us made my shoulders go tight. None of them followed for long. We pulled into the station. The same neon, the same soda machine. No Ray. The officer walked first, and I stayed a step behind. The clerk looked up fast this time and kept his phone down. We asked for the manager or the tapes. The cameras worked, but the lighting made everything grainy. The angle near the door showed shapes more than faces. A cap shadow. A blur of a hand. The knife flash was just a bright pixel. The officer watched a loop twice and then shook his head. He said there wasn't enough for anything serious unless I wanted to file a general incident. He pointed out there was no attack, no threat set on record, no injury, no theft. He said, "Be careful who you let in at night." He had a calm tone. He took my info and wrote a short case number on a card. We paid the attendant for the gas I had taken. The receipt paper curled in my hand. I walked outside with the officer and looked at the lot edges, the dark stretches beyond the pumps, the tire marks leading to the access road. No prints, no car left behind, no sign he had ever been there. Ray was gone. They sent a unit down the highway to look around, but they didn't expect much. The officer told me to keep going and not to stop until I needed daylight. I asked if they ever had trouble like this. He shrugged and said the highway runs strangers through all night. A lot of people pass. A lot never meet for long. I got back on the road and kept the speed steady. The white lines slid under the hood, steady as a heartbeat. I checked my mirrors every minute without a clock. Any car that held behind me for more than a mile made me tense up. I watched for box-ins. I kept space around me. I kept my doors locked and the windows up. I didn't stop again that night. I ate from a bag of pretzels and drank warm water from a plastic bottle, one hand on the wheel. The dashboard lights glowed dim and the phone cable swung the same slow arc. The map app stayed quiet since I already knew the way home. The horizon stayed black. I thought about the knife and the way he spoke. Not shouting, not excited, just instructing. The multi-tool clicking. The way he asked to see my glove box twice. The way he placed himself between me and the exits inside the store without touching me. Every move had a reason. By morning, the hills got green again and the clouds changed shape. I crossed the state line and watched for troopers. I kept scanning my rear view anyway. A gray sedan followed for a while and then took an exit. A pickup hovered and then passed. No one stayed with me long. I pulled into my parents' driveway late afternoon and shut the car off. My legs shook when I stood, so I walked to the porch and sat. The house smelled like laundry from the vent. I went inside and locked the door behind me and left the keys on the counter. I slept a few hours with the blinds open. I didn't tell a big story at home. I said I had a weird hitchhiker, and I didn't want to lecture. I told my friends later, and they said I was lucky. That felt true. I stopped giving rides to strangers after that. When someone stands by the road now, I look straight ahead and keep moving. I know I meant well that night. Help a guy in the dark. But that simple choice put me in a situation I couldn't control. If the cameras had been better. If the clerk had noticed faster. If I had hesitated at the door. Small details stack fast when it's late and empty out there. Sometimes I wake up and see that blade flash in my mind. I hear his voice explaining angles in a parking lot. I think about whether those stories were just to scare me, or if he had done them before and couldn't help telling. I don't know what is worse to believe. It taught me something I keep. Being kind doesn't mean being careless. You can hold both in your head at the same time. I'll still help people, but not from the driver's seat, not alone at midnight on a highway. I'm just grateful I trusted my instincts and got away when I did. During the summer when I was 16, I spent 2 weeks at this family resort in Colorado with my grandmother. It was the first time she'd let me have my own room separate from hers, which felt like real freedom after a boring summer in Portland. The place was big and fenced, with a guard at the gate, cameras by the lobby, and wristbands for the pools. Gardens ran between low white buildings, and a paved trail wound under trees. For the first time all summer, I could go places by myself. I started jogging early, headphones on, music up, following the painted arrows that marked a loop through the gardens. With families everywhere and staff in uniforms, I felt completely safe. That's when I first noticed the groundskeeper. He wore the resort's blue shirt with a small white logo and a faded cap, maybe in his 40s, with a sunburn line at the neck. He always waved when I ran past and said hello in broken English. By day 2, I had a routine. Up at 6:30, stretch on the balcony, phone clipped to my shorts. I took the same loop past the rose bed and the pond, across a small footbridge, then back by the tennis courts. The first time I saw him, he was raking mulch off the path, and he lifted the rake and waved. I lifted my hand and kept going. The next morning, he crouched by a sprinkler valve with a wrench while water misted the edge of the trail. He stepped back so I could pass and said, "Good morning." On the third morning, he leaned against a flatbed cart by the maintenance shed, eating from a plastic container. A red gas can was bungee corded to the rail, and a coil of hose lay on the bed. I passed the smell of cut grass and wet dirt, and listened to my shoes knock pebbles into the gutter. After that, I started to expect him like I expected the couple with the tiny dog by the gazebo. He showed up in different spots along my loop, trimming hedges or moving a hose. He never said more than a word or two. It felt like part of the place, normal and safe. One morning I saw him standing on the footbridge with no tools, just staring down into the water. He turned when my steps hit the boards, pointed at a duck, smiled, and waved. I said hi and kept going, and when I looked back, he was heading for the utility path. That afternoon, my grandmother took a pottery class, and I sat under a canvas shade at the cafe watching staff badge through a door marked "Staff Only." A cold blast of air rolled out, and a security cart idled near the gate. There were signs about staying on marked paths and not feeding wildlife. Everything felt controlled and safe. I kept my runs inside the fence and in daylight. I didn't tell my grandmother, because she would want to walk with me and turn it into a stroll. She liked that week because I could plan my day and meet her for meals without arguing. I saw no problem in 30 minutes alone around other guests and workers. By the 6th morning, I knew the grounds by heart. I knew where the asphalt buckled from tree roots, and where the indoor pool made the air smell like chlorine. I knew the exact spot my music dropped Wi-Fi and switched to offline. The groundskeeper was part of that mental map now. Blue shirt, cap, keys on his belt. Sometimes he waved early, like before I was close, as if he watched for me to come around the corner. I told myself it was nothing. People like patterns. I had one too. Another small thing. Twice I saw his cart parked with the hazard light blinking and no one around. The first time was near the gazebo, the orange light ticking against quiet air while the back tire sat half on the grass. I glanced around and didn't see him. Later, he pushed the cart past the cafe window with a leaf blower on the bed and a coil of hose over his shoulder. Normal enough. On Tuesday night, I stood at the map by the elevator and traced my loop with a finger, adding a tiny detour to make it longer. I set my alarm for 6:15 and texted my grandmother that I'd meet her for breakfast at 8. She sent back a heart and told me to try the cinnamon rolls. I put my phone by my water bottle and fell asleep to the hum of the air unit. Wednesday at 7 a.m., I headed out on my usual route. The light was flat and gray across the path. A worker rolled up the pool umbrellas. A man in a robe crossed the lawn carrying ice. My shoes made a soft slap on the rubber track by the basketball hoop. At the roses, a sprinkler clicked on, and a cool mist drifted over the edge of the path. I moved my phone under my shirt for a second and kept pace. The trail curved toward the pond and the bridge. I saw the groundskeeper near the bend, but he wasn't working. He stepped into the path like he was flagging a car and waved both arms fast. His cap was in his hand, and his face looked tight around the eyes. He called out, but my music was up. I slowed and checked behind me out of habit. The path was empty. Far off by the tennis courts, a woman pushed a stroller. The security cart sat near the gate with no one in it. He called again and jabbed a finger toward the gazebo, then back at me, quick and urgent. Since I knew he worked for the resort, I stopped and pulled out my earbuds to see what he wanted. He was standing at the entrance to a side trail that cut between taller hedges and a line of bamboo, away from the main loop. He pointed down it and smiled like he was inviting me to look. In one hand, he held a red flower with thick petals, bright and waxy, like something from a tropical plant. He bent slightly and held it out to me, then pointed again down the trail. I thought maybe the resort had a part of the garden guests didn't notice, a place with special plants. He said, "Pretty. Special today," and wiggled the flower in his fingers. I stepped closer, and he pressed the stem into my hand. It was wet near the base. He was already backing down the trail, waving me along. In his other hand, he held another red flower by the stem. His free hand stayed behind his back, elbow tight to his side. I followed a few steps and saw the ground change from asphalt to compacted dirt and fine gravel. The path narrowed. Tree roots lifted the edge like ripples. I looked at the flower, then looked up at him, and caught a flash of white behind his back. He didn't bring that hand forward. He kept gesturing with the flower, moving deeper. I slowed. The side trail curved left around a thicket, and the main loop noise dropped away. I could still hear a pool filter motor somewhere, but no voices. He glanced over my shoulder toward the open area. No one else was coming. He smiled again, but the skin at his eyes didn't move. He made a short beckoning motion with the flower like, "Come quick." I took one more step and angled my body to see past his shoulder. The white at his back shifted, pinched in his fist. A folded cloth. I couldn't see his wrist, but the hand was ready, not relaxed. My stomach went tight. I held the flower he gave me and felt the stem press into my palm like a small stick. He kept the distance the same, backing up as I moved, as if he didn't want me close until we were out of sight. I looked further down the trail and saw a small shed or storage building tucked behind a screen of trellis and green netting. It was one of those prefab units with a sloped roof and a metal hasp on the door. The door was propped open with a brick. A coil of hose lay thrown in a loose spiral near the step. In that moment, all of it lined up like a picture. The side path, his hand behind his back, the door open, no guests. I stopped and shifted my weight back. The flower felt stupid in my hand. I started backing away slowly. My heel crunched on the gravel louder than I wanted. He noticed, and his smile tightened like it was heavy on his face. He moved faster, not stepping back anymore. He lifted the hand from behind his back. The white cloth hung from his fingers, folded over itself, edges frayed. He took one quick step forward like he was going to close the space at once. I dropped the flower. It hit the dirt and left a red smear on my shoe. He lunged. I didn't wait. I turned and ran hard toward the open loop. My shoes slipped for half a second on the loose stones, then bit on asphalt. I pumped my arms and kept my head straight. My earbuds bounced against my collarbone. I heard his foot hit the dirt, then nothing, then a hard breath. I didn't look back. Past the roses, past the bridge, past the sign about no glass by the pool. A golf cart hummed somewhere close, and a staff radio crackled with static. I cut right across the lawn to save a few seconds and hit the paved path by the cafe. The lobby doors whooshed open and the air conditioning hit my face. I kept moving until I was past the front desk and near the big fern by the elevators. People in swimsuits walked by with towels around their necks. A bell chimed. My chest heaved, and my knees wanted to shake, but I kept them locked. I pressed the elevator button 3 times, even though it only lit up once. I didn't stop or look back until I was inside the elevator with 2 older women, and the doors were closed. They were talking about a breakfast coupon. I stared at the floor numbers and counted them as the elevator climbed. When the doors opened, I walked fast to my room, key card out, then shut the door and slid the latch. The air unit hummed. I looked through the peephole. Empty hall. I set the earbuds on the table and went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. My hands were shaking a little now, so I grabbed the counter until they calmed. I kept thinking about the shed door and the cloth. I didn't like the picture my mind kept building around that. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, and waited for my grandmother to wake up in her own room down the hall like we planned for breakfast. I never told her or anyone else at the resort about what happened that morning. I didn't want to blow up the vacation or make her clamp down on me again. She was happy, and I could handle being careful. For the rest of the days, I stuck close to her. We ate by the window, we did the pottery class together, we played cards in the lounge when it rained one afternoon. I didn't go off by myself. I didn't take the side trails. I kept my head up near the gardens and watched the main paths. I only saw the groundskeeper one more time. It was 2 days later near the lower pool. He stood with a security guard by the towel cart. The guard had a clipboard and was checking a list. The groundskeeper talked and pointed down toward the tennis courts. He looked like he was explaining a maintenance issue. When he noticed me on the stairs, he cut his eyes over and held them there 9-10 seconds. Then he smiled. Not big. Just enough. His mouth formed a word. It looked like flower. He touched the brim of his cap like a greeting, then turned back to the guard and kept talking. I kept walking. I didn't change my pace. I went down the steps, past the vending machine, and into the indoor pool area where the air was thick and loud. I stayed there with my grandmother for an hour. When we left, I checked the hallway and then the door to the outside. I didn't see him. I didn't go jogging again. Not that week. Not after. When we got back home, I stopped setting my alarm for early runs. I took different routes to the bus stop. I sat near the driver when it was dark. I told myself the resort had security and cameras and maybe he was just weird. but then I would picture the shed and the open door and the white cloth in his hand. I kept it simple. Don't go alone. Don't follow. Don't hesitate if something feels wrong. Sometimes I wonder if I should have reported him. Maybe he tried the same thing with other young guests. Maybe nothing happened after. I don't know. I still think about that smile and the way he timed his wave on the path, like he knew my loop by then. I was only 16 and didn't know how to handle a situation like that. It happened last summer when I was doing a nature photography shoot in Sacramento's Central Park early in the morning. I'm 28 and freelance, and I plan shoots around light. I parked before sunrise, slung my backpack on, and walked to a small footbridge where the sun cuts through the trees. The grass was wet and the metal rail felt cold. I set the tripod, wiped the lens, and started with a few frames of empty path and low mist. Sprinklers clicked somewhere far off. It was quiet, just the steady morning hum of a big park. A middle-aged woman walked past and stared the whole time she crossed my view. She didn't smile or nod. She just watched me like I was in her way. She passed again a minute later and did the same thing, eyes locked on me, head slightly tilted. I told myself she was waiting for the spot or curious about my gear. I kept working. I changed angle to catch the first warm beam on the bridge rail, checked the histogram, then looked up to find her again. She was there again. I felt the attention but stayed focused on routine. I listened to the morning. About 10 minutes later she returned, and this time she turned and walked straight toward me. I noticed a limp in her left leg. She moved in a pattern. A few steps, stop, long stare, then a few more steps. The way she stopped felt deliberate, like she had practiced it. I kept the tripod between us and raised my voice enough. "Do you need help?" I asked. At the same time, I started packing. I capped the lens, coiled the shutter cable, and slid the camera strap over my wrist so I could move fast if I had to. She didn't respond. Her mouth moved, but the sounds weren't words, only wet noises and short grunts. Her hands lifted and dropped like she was catching invisible rain. As the face came close, the details shifted into focus. It wasn't a woman. It was a man in women's clothing, wearing a wig placed low on the forehead. The hair looked synthetic, and stubble showed through the makeup in the early light. His pupils were wide and his movements were chaotic, unbalanced, and abrupt. He swayed, then jerked sideways and stared past me at nothing. The scene felt wrong and unsafe. He drifted to a stand of bushes beside the path and began breaking thin branches one after another. He tossed them into the path and kicked at dry leaves. He made two kinds of sound, a garbled laugh and a low growl, switching between them like he was testing both. Birds burst up, and then everything went quiet again. I held my gear tight and backed one step so all three tripod legs were on the pavement. He pushed deeper into the brush until I lost sight of him, but the noises kept moving. They drifted away, paused, started. I called my friend Mark and asked him to stay on the phone for safety. I didn't want to escalate with police if it was just someone high and noisy, but I wanted a witness and a voice. Mark answered on the second ring. I gave him my location and told him I'd keep the line open. I lowered the tripod to chest height and tightened all the knobs so I could lift and carry without the legs sliding out. "I'm finishing fast," I said. I kept my voice level and my hands working. I watched the brush while packing. The sounds from the bushes slid left, then right, then went still. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear a scrape, a crack, and a shuffle. I kept the path to the lot in my peripheral view. It was a straight shot, maybe 300 yards, sunlight cutting across it. I decided to take the frames I needed and leave. No discussion, no more contact. One wide of the bridge with clean light and one tight detail of the railing flare. A basic set so I would not have to come back. I set my feet and worked. I took 6 shots in quick sequence and every click felt too loud in the quiet. My hands stayed steady because I made them stay steady. Mark asked, "You good?" I said, "Almost." A branch snapped to my right and I turned with the camera pressed against my chest. I didn't see him. I waited 5 seconds, then took 3 more frames from a different angle, put the cap on, and moved to the bag. I worked one zipper at a time while I watched the bushes. I kept the phone at my ear. The line stayed open still. The ivy shook once when there was no breeze, just a low ripple, then silence. I slid the tripod into the side strap and cinched it down tight. I didn't like turning my back, so I stayed half squared to the brush and shuffled toward the exit between actions. Mark kept talking so I wouldn't forget he was there. He told me the time and said to keep him updated. I told him the guy was still in the bushes, unpredictable, and that I had what I needed. The noise shifted ahead, like it moved in front of me suddenly. I didn't run. Running would blind me to the sound. I walked slow, 3 steps, pause, listen, 3 more, eyes on the brush line. I let quiet return between each move so any new noise stood out. The rustling kept pace, then fell back, then came from the side. I couldn't tell if it was him or bushes settling from where he'd torn at them. I measured distance by trash cans and bright rectangles of sun across the path. The next 15 minutes stretched into stops. I could hear rustling in the bushes around me, which made me really nervous. When the sounds finally stopped, I stood still for a full minute and waited. No birds, no twigs snapping, just distant traffic and a plane somewhere. I told Mark I was heading out, and I put the phone in my pocket with the line still open. I moved toward the parking lot at a steady pace, camera bag on my back, tripod in my hand like a handle. The path opened to asphalt and white lines. My car sat under a small tree with a faded blue trash can beside it. I checked around and saw no movement near the benches. The air smelled like wet grass and hot pavement warming up. I scanned the rows. I was relieved to see the space where that car had been earlier was empty now. No one leaning on a bumper, no figure pacing. I slowed to unlock my car and watched the sidewalk. A bus exhaled on the street beyond the gate. I looked down at the key fob to hit unlock, and then looked up again. The same man stepped through the park entrance like he had been waiting on timing. The wig was gone. He wore a plain t-shirt, dark jeans, and sneakers. Clean walk, no limp now. He passed close, shoulder angled, like he wanted me to feel how near he was. He gave me a slow grin that showed teeth. It wasn't friendly. It was a message. There was something tight in his eyes. Not just interest. He scanned my bag strap, the tripod in my hand, my camera strap under my jacket collar. I didn't say anything. I shifted the tripod to my dominant hand and kept my keys between my fingers. I picked up my pace, closed the space to my car, and kept my body turned so my face and chest were toward him. I put the bag in first, fast, and kept the tripod out, angled at my hip. He kept walking, but his head turned back, and he watched me like he was taking notes. As I opened the driver door, I glanced left and saw him again. He had circled the same way I came, and now he was walking straight at my spot. Not a jog, not a casual stroll. Purposeful. He zeroed in on the driver's side like he had measured it already. I slid in, pulled the door shut, and hit the lock. The click felt thin. I started the engine. He was close enough to see a faint scrape on his cheek under the stubble. I put the car in drive and rolled forward smooth. No tire squeal, no big move. I didn't want to give a chase idea. He stopped in the middle of the lot and turned his whole body to follow me with his eyes. I checked the rear view and saw him standing there, hands down. That same grin faded into a hard look. He didn't move until I turned out of the lot. On the side street, I slowed at a stop sign and looked right. An old sedan sat half in shade in a narrow alley that cut along the park fence. Dull beige paint, mismatched hubcap, a dent on the rear quarter. A sun visor was folded down. A wig sat on the passenger seat like a spare hat. It matched the one from earlier. I felt the connection click into place with no drama. It was his. The angle gave him a view of both the gate and the lot. I pulled just far enough past that alley to read the plate in my side mirror. I said the numbers out loud for Mark, then again slower so he could type them. I made a quick voice note on my phone once I got to a safe stop sign. I turned once around the block to make sure he wasn't behind me. He wasn't. The empty spot in my mirror gave me room to think and act. I parked 2 streets away on a busier road and wrote the plate on a small receipt from my pocket. I took a photo of it with my phone in one of the corner where the alley met the fence. I sat with the engine running and decided my next move. I could call non-emergency and file a report. I could also leave, but then I'd have nothing if he showed up again somewhere. I didn't want to escalate with a patrol car rolling in hot. I also didn't want to pretend it was fine. The costume change wasn't random. It meant planning. It meant he had a routine. He had time, and he used it. I called the non-emergency line and kept it simple. Suspicious person, erratic behavior, possible stalking in the park, plate number, description, time, my name, and that I was leaving the area now. I hung up and drove home on a route with more cars and stops. I checked my mirror at every light. I took note of a red truck, a white SUV, a cyclist in a bright vest. None of them stayed with me more than a turn or two. My grip on the wheel was steady. My gear stayed on the passenger floor in reach. I told Mark I was fine, and I'd text him the plate and a short summary in case I needed it later. I sent both from a gas station lot and then headed to my apartment. I still don't understand what that person wanted from me, and I avoid shooting in that park during early morning hours. The way he switched from the feminine disguise to regular clothes felt calculated and creepy. It wasn't a joke or a harmless prank. It was pressure testing. His aggressive staring and the menacing grin will stick with me for a long time. I changed how I plan my sessions. I bring a second person if it's early or empty. If I work alone, I work closer to people, and I move my car to a spot that faces the exit. I keep the phone on a live call when something feels off. I take note of cars, plates, faces, clothing, walking patterns. I store the notes in a folder labeled with dates and locations. I added a small alarm to my bag and a can of spray to the quick pocket. When I park, I do one slow sweep before I even unclip the tripod. If something is wrong, I don't push through it. I relocate or I leave. No shot is worth the attention of someone like that. Sometimes I wonder if he was targeting photographers specifically, or if I was just unlucky. A person with expensive equipment, focused on their work, head down, predictable path from a scenic spot to a car. That is easy to map. Maybe he had done it before. Maybe he waits for someone to ignore their instincts. I won't make that easy for anyone now. My pictures still look the same, but my routine is different. There was no dramatic ending that morning, no chase, and no fight. But the steps he took were enough. He watched, he changed costume, he closed distance, he tested. That is enough to tell me the risk is real. The whole encounter lasted less than an hour, but it completely changed how I approach solo photography sessions in isolated areas. When I was 19 and in my sophomore year at LSU, I was dating this girl who lived about an hour and a half away in Lafayette. I'd drive out on Fridays after my last class and come back late Saturday night because my parents wanted me home by 11:30. They always reminded me why. Deer on the road. Hogs, too. Stray dogs in the ditches after dark. Don't race the clock, my dad said. I didn't. I took the back roads because they were faster than the interstate, and because I knew them well in the dark and rain. That Saturday, it rained all day. By the time I said goodbye to my girlfriend, the rain had stopped, but the air turned into fog. It sat low over the pastures like smoke. My wipers still squeaked to clear the fine mist. The asphalt looked dark and greasy. I set my cruise low and kept both hands on the wheel, shoulders tight, eyes flicking between the center line and the edges. The speed limit wasn't a suggestion out there. I kept it and backed off more when the road dipped and the drainage ditches shined like long black mirrors at night. The first half of the trip was quiet. The radio kept cutting between stations, so I turned it off and listened to the tires. I kept to the limit and slowed any time I saw eyes flicker from the tree line. Sometimes it was just fence posts throwing back the beams. Sometimes it was a rabbit frozen by the edge. Every mailbox looked like a person for a second, and then turned into a mailbox again. I rolled my shoulders and tried to stay loose, but my neck stayed tight, and the steering wheel felt slick under my hands tonight. The fog got thicker the farther I went. High beams only made a white wall, so I left the lows on and followed the reflective paint, faded in spots. Passing empty driveways, I saw water filling the ruts. A tractor sat under a tin roof with one tire off, and even that looked like a crouched shape in the corner of my eye. I wasn't scared. I was careful, and I kept moving. I knew this route well enough to feel the curves in my hands before I saw them, but I still took each bend like something waited there. About halfway home, I came into a small town I always used as a landmark. One blinking light. A 24-hour store with 2 pumps and a busted ice freezer by the door. Across from it, a McDonald's with the lobby closed but the drive-thru open, menu boards glowing through the haze. I checked the time. If I kept moving, I would make 11:30 easy. I thought about grabbing coffee and decided not to waste minutes. I rolled through the intersection, tires humming, and let the town slide by in the fog like a short commercial break on the road tonight. A car pulled out of the McDonald's drive-thru just ahead of me and took the same road I needed. It went slow from the first turn, so I eased off and gave space. The taillights were my only points now, 2 red coins floating in milk. I figured the driver was cautious like me. No reason to pass. There wasn't room anyway. We rolled past the last streetlight and into the dark again, the town shrinking behind us, the fog closing like a curtain across the rear view until there was nothing left but those lights and the wet road ahead. I stayed behind, hoping it would turn off and let me get back to my usual pace. But the car kept straight through the empty stretch past the feed store and the small cemetery with the chain-link fence. The fog swallowed the headstones to gray shapes. The red lights blinked as the driver tapped the brakes for every curve, even the shallow ones I knew by heart. My chest felt tight from leaning forward, so I sat back, loosened my grip, and watched the distance like a number I couldn't change, but still kept checking every few seconds anyway there. The road left town completely, and it was just the 2 of us. No houses, no shoulder. I had to follow those lights because there was nothing else to aim at. The center line disappeared in the glare. The ditches were full of water. I thought about my curfew and my Monday class, and how irritated my mom would be if I called late. Being late was better than spinning out on muddy gravel, so I backed off a touch and breathed, letting the cold air bite my face through the window crack and keep me awake and steady there. I cracked the windows more to get cold air on my face. The fog drifted in and smelled like wet grass and diesel. It helped. I turned the fan on defrost and watched the glass clear in a little arc where the heat met the night air. The slow car drifted toward the center a couple times, then corrected. Maybe they were tired too. I kept a safe gap, counting 3 seconds after every curve, and kept my eyes moving so I didn't lock on the lights and forget the rest of the road waiting outside the beams out there. We came up on a warning sign, the crossbuck in my headlights, and I knew the crossing was close. That stretch goes uphill a little before the tracks. You can't see the rails until you're on the rise. In dry weather, I would downshift and roll it. Tonight I kept my foot light and watched the red coins floating up the grade. No bells, no arms, just the crossbucks and faded RR on the road. Being in a hurry, I eased closer. I closed to maybe 10 feet. That's when everything went wrong in the span of about 2 seconds. The car ahead snapped left like somebody yanked the wheel, tires squealing on wet pavement, and slid sideways across the grade. My headlights filled the gap at left and hit the tracks, and there was a man right there, no more than 8 feet in front of my bumper. He was laid across the rail like he fell and didn't get up. He looked thin and pale, with patchy hair like he shaved it and let it grow wrong. He rocked his shoulders back and forth and clawed at his own face with dirty fingernails, scratching lines into his cheeks. I yanked my wheel hard right on instinct, felt the back end squirm, and came around him by inches, both tires drumming over the wooden planks. I cleared the tracks and stomped the brakes. The slow car shot forward into the fog and vanished. It was just me and the crossing, and the white air that ate everything outside the beams. I hit the hazards. The orange lights clicked on and off, painting the wet rails. I unbuckled, leaned across, and pushed the window down. Cold, wet air came in and stuck to my skin. I stuck my head out and listened past the engine. It was quiet except for the ticking of my blinkers and the hiss of the defrost. "Hey," I called, normal voice, not yelling, not wanting to spook him. "Hey, are you okay? I didn't hit you, did I?" My own voice sounded small and flat in the fog. The man pushed himself upright in a slow, shaky way. He turned his head toward me with a stiff twist, chin first, then the rest, like he had a bad neck or he hadn't moved in a while. He stood on the ties with his feet apart and didn't come closer. For several seconds he just looked at me, or past me, I couldn't tell, because his eyes were dark in the glare. Then he opened his mouth and let out a scream that didn't sound like a word or a cry for help. It sounded like pain tearing out of him, long and harsh. He didn't give any sign. He just broke into a sprint and ran straight at my door, arms pumping, shoulders low. I dropped my head back in, grabbed the shifter and slammed it into drive. My foot went down all the way. The tires spun a half second on the wet and then caught, and I shot forward down the grade, the hazards still clicking, the sound fast now under the engine. About a minute down, I caught the other driver. He had pulled over on the gravel right side where a field entrance cut through the ditch. His reverse lights glowed for a moment and went out. He had his phone up to his face, lit screen bright. I rolled down enough to yell without stopping, slowing to match his window. "Did you see that guy back there?" I said. He cupped the phone to his ear and yelled, "Yeah, I'm calling the police right now. I'm going back to check on him." His voice was tight and loud, like he was forcing it to be steady for the person on the line. I nodded once and coasted, then braked and waited for him to turn around. The fog made the red of his brake lights smear across the wet road. I flipped my hazards off, took a breath, and turned around too, keeping my speed low so I didn't overrun him on the way back in that murk. We rolled back toward the crossing together, his car in front again, but faster now, both of us hugging the right side and watching for anything moving. The crossbuck sign came out of the white mask, and then the rails, black lines across the grade. He stopped short. I eased up next to him, angled so both our headlights covered the tracks. The ties were slick and the steel shined. There was nobody there. The ballast was wet and stirred up in places from our braking. but there were no footprints I could pick out from the glare. No hat, no shirt, no blood, no nothing. The fog coiled over the rails and drifted across the road like slow smoke, and then pulled apart again. We cut our engines to listen. There was only the ticking of cooling metal and the drip from the trees. He told the dispatcher where we were and what we saw. He gave the mile marker and the parish road number. I kept my lights on the rails and scanned the ditches with my phone light, sweeping the beam along the waterline. It showed grass laid flat by the rain and brown water moving slow. No movement. No sound. I kept my distance from the tracks because I didn't want to step wrong and slip. A horn would have carried for a long way out there, but there was nothing. Just gray air that felt heavy in my throat. Headlights in the distance finally cut through the fog after a long wait and grew into a unit. Blue and red lights came up behind and washed the white air with flashes. 2 deputies got out. One had a hat brim beaded with water and a big flashlight. They split without talking much, one on each side of the grade, and swept light along the rails and the brush. Another unit came and parked near the sign. They checked both directions down the tracks and called out to each other by last names. They walked the ditches and shined into the field entrance and along the fence. Tire marks from our cars were clear on the wet gravel and the road edge. The deputy with the hat asked us what we saw. We told it straight. He asked how close I got. I said 8 feet, maybe less, and I didn't hit him. He nodded and wrote time and direction and our names and phone numbers on a little pad in a plastic sleeve, and then tucked it back in his pocket. They stayed out there about 20 minutes, maybe more. They checked a shed across the field, and a culvert and a patch of trees where the ditch widened. Nothing turned up. The older deputy came back and told us there were no fresh missing person calls in the area tonight, and no closures or walkaways from any hospitals, group homes, or detox places around here. He said he would put out a welfare alert for a male on foot near the tracks, thin and barefoot, and asked the next parish over to keep a lookout at their crossings. He told us we did right to call and to be careful around the rails. He said it twice. We stood there with the doors open, lights cutting the fog, and it felt like the tracks swallowed the man and sent him somewhere else down the line where we couldn't follow in cars. I didn't say that out loud. I only kept looking while the deputies talked on their radios and angled their beams along the ties one more time. The other driver rubbed his hands on his jeans and kept glancing at his mirror. When they cleared us, we turned our cars around slow and went back the way we came, single file, my eyes flicking to the rails as they slid past, expecting movement and seeing only the same wet wood and the black steel and the fog moving. I don't know what was wrong with that man or where he went. I think maybe he was in some kind of crisis and needed a medic, not cars coming at him from both sides. I feel bad I didn't get out, but when he screamed and charged, I left. It was instinct. It felt like a threat, and the road was wet, and there was no shoulder. I remember his feet slapping the wood through my window. I remember his nails on his face. It plays quick, then stops. When I pass that spot now, I ease off without thinking and check the rails, even in daylight. I still think about him whenever I drive through that area, wondering what his story was and if he ever got the help he clearly needed. So for the context, this is a continuation of something that happened to me a few months ago when a man tried to attack me on my way home from school. After that, I changed my route, stayed on busy streets, and walked with other kids. I kept my phone ready and my keys in my fist. For a while it felt under control. Then he started showing up near my house instead, like he found a way to be there without breaking any rule. The first time he stood outside our place, he did slow passes on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, head turned toward our windows. Third pass, He stopped at our fence and stared at the steps. I closed the curtain, locked the door, and called my mom. She said to stay inside and keep everything locked. I watched him through a tiny gap until he left. My hands shook a little when I wrote the time down on a sticky note. After that, he came 3 or 4 times a week, usually when I was alone between school and my mom's shift ending. He walked the same short stretch from the corner mailbox to the neighbor's maple and back. When a car turned onto our street, he drifted away, looked at his phone, then returned. He never spoke. He never touched the gate. He just watched the house like he was waiting for someone to make a mistake. My mom called the police every single time. They arrived quiet, took notes, and looked around. They told us he was staying on public property, so they could file reports, but not much else. One officer advised cameras and an incident log. Document dates, times, clothing, behavior. We bought 2 cheap cameras and a small spiral notebook. I put the notebook by the kitchen phone and kept a pen clipped to it. We mounted a camera over the porch and one at the back door. The porch camera had a tiny red light that blinked at night. I tested the phone app and watched the feeds from the kitchen table. I started logging everything: date, time, hood or cap, number of passes, how long he stopped at the fence, where he looked. Some days nothing happened. On those days, I kept curtains closed after dark and checked locks twice. One afternoon, a patrol car stopped him by the mailbox. I watched through the curtain. The officer talked to him a long time and then came to our door. He said the guy claimed he walked for exercise and liked quiet streets. No warrants. The officer repeated the advice. Keep documenting. Call if he comes back. We added a motion light for the driveway, checked the screws on the deadbolts, and tested the back door rod. I also changed small things. I got off the bus 1 stop early some days and 1 stop late on others. I wore my backpack on both shoulders so I could run if needed. I kept a whistle on my keychain. Even with that, he kept showing up between 3 and 6 while I was alone. He avoided the porch camera's angle like he knew its blind spot. By the fence posts, I found fresh scuffs and curls of white paint on the dirt. I wrote those details in the log and told my mom. Then last week, the situation got much worse when I started hearing scratching and tapping sounds on the exterior walls of our house every evening. The sounds would begin right after dark and continue for 15 to 20 minutes at a time. The first night it came from the living room wall. Small, steady taps like a pencil on a desk. I checked for branches. Nothing touched the siding. The second night the sounds returned and drifted toward the porch. I watched the camera feed. The angle missed the base of the wall near the steps. The tapping turned into a slow scrape, then stopped. The neighbor's dogs stayed quiet, which was strange because they bark at every delivery truck. I went to the peephole. The porch looked empty. I stood there holding my breath and listened until my legs felt tight. On the third night, I decided not to wait. I turned off inside lights so the glass wouldn't reflect me. I put on sneakers and set my phone to dial fast. Right after dark, the sounds began again. Pick, 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 then a long scratch, then pick. I lifted the front curtain 1 inch. A hunched figure in a dark jacket with the hood up stood by the steps, facing the wall. His hands moved slow against the siding like he was picking at the paint. He wasn't trying the door. He was focused on the wall, calm and patient, staying under the overhang where the sensor never trips. The red LED on the porch camera blinked, but it couldn't see him. The driveway light stayed dark. The dogs stayed silent. I stepped back and recorded video through the gap like the officer told us to do. I could hear fine grit falling on the concrete. I didn't stay there. I needed a door I could lock. I moved down the hall without turning on lights. I checked the back deadbolt and shoved the rod harder into the sliding track. I slipped the spiral log into my backpack because I knew the operator would ask for details. The scratching paused once, and a board creaked like a foot shifted. I didn't look again. I went straight into the bathroom, turned the lock until it clicked, and shut off the light so my shadow wouldn't show. I sat on the tile against the tub and opened the dialer. The ceiling fan hummed. Through the wall, I still heard the slow scrape and small taps, steady and patient, as if he had all the time in the world. I looked at the signal bars, full. I kept my voice ready in my throat and held the phone tight so I wouldn't drop it. I thought about the porch blind spot and the chipped paint by the posts and the silent dogs. I immediately called 911 and locked myself in the bathroom while waiting for police to arrive. The sirens were close when I heard gravel move outside. I stayed in the bathroom until the knock came and the officer said my name. When I opened the door, the living room was bright from headlights. The front yard looked white. The porch camera still blinked its little light. 2 officers walked the grass with flashlights. One of them pointed at the wall near the steps. Small scratches showed in the paint like someone dragged a key. There were new dents the size of coins. I told them about the hooded jacket and how he hunched by the siding. One officer checked the gate latch. The other pushed on the fence panel between our yard and the neighbors. It moved a little. He followed the line to where their trash bins sit. The lid on one bin wasn't closed all the way. He raised the lid and shined in. Nothing. Then he crouched and looked at the ground. The dust was scuffed like someone jumped and landed hard. They went to the neighbor's yard. I watched from the porch with my arms crossed tight to keep from shaking. The taller officer yelled, "Police!" and they went along the fence toward the alley. A minute later, I heard the chain link rattle, and then the officer came back breathing harder. "He cleared the fence," he said. "We didn't get eyes on him. He's fast." They asked me to describe again. Dark jacket, hood up, average height, thin, quiet. That was all I had. The officer wrote everything down and took short video of the scratches and dents with his phone. He looked at my porch camera and asked about the angle. I showed the app. We replayed it. There was only a corner of his sleeve once, then nothing. The officer's jaw tightened. He said, "We can classify this as vandalism and trespass. We don't have enough to attach it to the prior reports. The description is too general." He told me he would add it to the case number. They promised to increase patrols on our street. He said if we could swing it, an alarm system would help. "At least something that beeps on door openings," he said. He gave my mom a brochure for a local company. She put it on the counter and nodded. "We'll look," she said. After they left, the porch light felt weak. I checked the lock on the door twice, then took the baseball bat from the hall closet and leaned it next to my bed. We looked up alarms online, but everything cost more than we expected, especially with installation. My mom called 2 companies for quotes. They offered an appointment next week. She didn't want a stranger walking through the house while I was alone, so we waited for a day she could be home. I kept the log up to date and added what the officer said. The next evenings were quiet. No scratching, no walks in front of our fence. It felt like a pause, not an end. This morning there was a small package on our doorstep when I went out to get the newspaper. It was wrapped in brown paper with clear tape and had no return address, just our house number written big. I didn't touch it. I went inside and called for my mom. She picked it up with 2 fingers and set it on the table. The paper felt soft, like it had been in someone's pocket. She cut the tape with the kitchen scissors and opened the top. Inside were disassembled parts from an old phone, a cracked screen, a scratched back panel, tiny screws in a plastic bag, and a battery with a faded logo. There was also a small note folded twice. My mom opened it flat on the table. The letters were uneven and big, with funny angles like someone tried to write with their left hand. It said, "Sorry for the trouble. No other words, no name, no threat. The letters had pressure marks that dented the paper. We didn't touch anything else. My mom took a photo and called the police. When the local officer arrived, he looked at the package and the note and shrugged a little. "Could be teenage pranking," he said. "Without video or witnesses, it's hard to say." He bagged the note and the parts, told us he would file it with the other reports, and repeated the same advice. Don't react to provocations, don't engage, don't leave the house alone. He said he'd ask for more patrols. After he left, my mom said we would do our part. She put new batteries in the motion sensors we had in a drawer and tested the porch camera again. I started carrying a whistle and pepper spray in my backpack. The spray is legal here, and the officer said to keep it in an easy pocket, not buried. At home, I keep the baseball bat by my bed and a second flashlight on the nightstand. I also keep my shoes next to the bed so I can move fast. In the evenings, I walk the inside perimeter of the house before dark. I check front door, back door, the kitchen window latches, the sliding door rod, the garage interior door, and the bathroom window we never open. I angle the blinds so I can see out, but they can't see in. I look under the porch through the crawlspace vent with my phone light. I note every sound. A car door down the block. A plane. The wind in the maple. I listen for the scratch that isn't the wind. I'm not confident I could defend myself in a direct confrontation. I'm small. I'm still in school. I know whistles and spray and a bat are not magic. I think about what might happen next every time I see a shadow at the edge of the blinds. Even locked doors don't feel solid when someone keeps returning and learning our routine. He knows when my mom leaves. He knows what time the bus drops me off. I don't like how predictable our schedule is. The worst part is knowing the police can't really do anything until something serious actually happens. I understand why. They need proof. They need a face clear on video or a name or a hand on the door. But waiting for that moment feels like watching a door frame for a crack to form. I keep the spiral log clean, neat, and ready. Dates, times, any detail I catch. I record every small sound, even when it's probably nothing. I don't understand what this person wants from me. He doesn't try to talk. He doesn't demand anything. He just shows up and stands and scratches at our paint and leaves a strange package with a note that means nothing. The uncertainty makes normal things feel different. I take shorter showers. I don't wear earbuds at home. I keep my phone charged and the ringer on. I sit where I can see the front walk and the driveway. I keep the inside lights low. My parents are looking into moving to a different neighborhood. They have a notebook with addresses and school zones and rental prices. It's a big decision. It would change my bus route, my friends, and my mom's commute. We talk about it at the table when the house is quiet and the porch camera blinks its red light. She says safety first. I say yes. We both look at the front door. I just want this to end. I want to feel safe in my own home again. Growing up, I thought the weirdest thing that ever happened to me was this incident when I was about 10 years old. My mom and I were walking our dog around the neighborhood in suburban Detroit one night, pretty late, maybe around 11 p.m. We cut past the corner stop sign and followed the sidewalk that ran along the chain-link fence of the nature preserve. On the other side was the marsh, flat and dark, with cattails and black water between the reeds. The air was cold enough to see our breath. Our beagle's tags clicked against her collar, then went quiet when she stopped to sniff the wet grass. At night, the trailhead gate was locked with a rusted padlock. It was so quiet, that night I could hear the distant freeway like a low hum. Porch lights were off up and down the street. That's when we heard it. calls floating out from the marsh. At first, it sounded like birds. Not one bird, but a few, short notes, then a longer one. I waited for the repeat, but it changed. The pattern kept changing in a way that made me think of a person trying things out. It went high, then low, then stopped. I remember the way my mom turned her head. She didn't say anything at first. Her mouth pressed tight, the leash wrapped twice around her hand, and she started moving faster. The sound came again, closer, like it had crossed a pocket of open water. It wasn't loud. It was careful. Very careful. Our dog's ears flattened. She let out a small whine and leaned toward our house. A third set of calls came. 3 notes, a pause, then 2, like someone whistling with their tongue against their teeth. Again it changed. No rhythm you could set your foot to. No repeat. The wind barely moved the trees. Even at 10, I realized the sound didn't fit. It was too deliberate to be a bird. I felt the leash tighten again and looked up at my mom. She had both hands on it now. Mom grabbed my hand. "We're going back inside. Now." She didn't look at me when she said it. She kept her eyes on the fence and the black gaps in the reeds. I asked what it was. She shook her head once. The leash jerked when the dog pulled. We turned around and walked fast without running. I kept waiting for the calls to start again. They didn't. What I heard instead was our shoes on the concrete and the rattle of the leash clip. When we reached our driveway, Mom didn't stop to let me pick up the mail like usual. She had the keys out before we hit the porch. She checked over her shoulder one time at the preserve and then unlocked the door. Inside, she slid the deadbolt and the chain and stood listening. I stood there too, holding the leash. The dog drank water like she'd been holding her breath. I asked again, quieter. She told me to keep away from the trails after dark, said it wasn't safe out there at night. Then she closed the blinds in the living room and kitchen. I didn't understand why she was so freaked out. Seeing her scared made me scared too. I sat on the couch with my jacket still on, hearing the heater kick on and off, trying to match that sound to the calls, and failing. Mom didn't turn on the TV. She stayed by the window for a while, lifting one corner of the blind with her finger and looking toward the preserve like she was waiting to see a shape in the reeds. After a few minutes, she told me to take the dog to my room and keep the door closed. I did what she said. That night I slept with the light on and the door cracked. Nothing else happened. In the morning, the marsh looked the same as always. Gray water, brown grass, a few Canada geese standing on the bank like they owned the place. After a while, I basically forgot about the whole thing. 2 years later, I was walking our dog by myself late one evening when those same calls started up again. This time, they seemed to be coming from behind this big bush right next to our front door. As soon as I heard them, I got chills down my spine and remembered exactly how my mom had looked that night, terrified and staring out into the marsh at something I couldn't see. The porch light was off and I could see the dark mass of the bush by the mat. The calls came again from inside the leaves, soft and wrong. I stood there with the leash in my hand and my key halfway to the lock. My hands went cold. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just moved. I ran inside as fast as I could and didn't go out alone after dark for weeks. I locked the door, then locked it again like that would change anything. If the dog needed a walk, I kept to the backyard and watched the gate. I set the porch light to stay on at night. When I heard any sound like a whistle or a bird, I turned up the TV. Over the years, I thought about it less and less, and only mentioned it to a few close friends. The whole thing just seemed so random and infrequent that it faded from my memory. Last year, at age 26, I moved to Arizona with my girlfriend Jessica for a new job opportunity. We packed a U-Haul and drove west. We found an apartment on the edge of a desert wash, beige walls and low stucco buildings. My job was across town in an office park. We'd been there a few months and were really enjoying the change of scenery and lifestyle. For 4th of July, we decided to go camping along the Colorado River to watch fireworks. We drove out in the afternoon and found the free campground behind a hospital lot, where a dirt road ran down to the water. There were a few scattered sites, some RVs, a couple of tents. The river was wide there, dark green with a slow current. We picked a spot at the far end where the brush thinned out. No one was close to us. We set up the tent, a small dome, and put our cooler by the door. Across the water we could see low houses and a distant bridge. As it got dark, fireworks started upriver, little bursts against the clouds. They were far, so the light barely reached us. We had to walk to the edge by the rocks to see anything more than a glow. The ground at the bank was packed dirt mixed with smooth stones. The air felt heavy. A huge thunderstorm was building over the desert. The clouds stacked on each other, and every now and then we saw heat lightning with no sound. The wind picked up and pushed the smell of wet plants through the campground. We heard 2 short blasts from a river patrol boat around dusk. They moved through with spotlights and a PA telling people to clear small crafts off the water until the storm passed. A few kayaks turned back toward the marina. After that, it grew even quieter. Most of the other campers drifted down the riverbank to find better viewing angles between trees. A couple left their chairs and coolers near their fires and walked away. Our side felt empty. Behind us, the hospital's back lot hummed with AC units. I could see a row of lit windows and an ambulance bay. Jessica and I just stayed at our campsite drinking beer and enjoying the relative solitude. We sat in our folding chairs by the edge and watched the dim fireworks reflect on the ripples. The wind rippled the tent and rattled the zipper pull. Somewhere upriver, thunder rolled. The first fat drops hit the dust and made dark spots. We didn't talk much. We just listened to the water and waited for the big show that never really got close. Suddenly, we heard the rhythmic sound of someone paddling through the water. It cut through the wind in a clean beat. Dip, pull, lift. We both turned toward the middle of the river. About 30 meters offshore, a narrow canoe shape slid along with barely a wake. No lights on it, just a dark line against darker water. Jessica finished her can and stood. She brushed off her shorts and said she would walk back to the car to get more beer. The car was up near the hospital fence, maybe a 5-minute round trip. I told her I'd watch the chairs. She walked off with the empty cans and her phone light bouncing on the ground. Her steps faded fast. Alone, I kept my eyes on the canoe. It moved slow, almost drifting. I couldn't see any details. The person inside sat low. The hat looked wide, maybe a sun hat or a cheap boonie hat. No fishing rod, no cooler, just the paddle dipping steady. Then the calls started. The same bird-like sounds I'd heard 16 years ago back in Detroit, down to the strange changes in pattern. One short note, then a longer one, then a stutter like someone trying to whistle with a dry mouth. My body went rigid. The hairs on my arms lifted. I didn't move. The wind hissed through the reeds at the edge, and the calls slid over it like they were aimed right at me. The canoe got directly across from our campsite and stopped. The paddle rested on the gunnels. The person turned the canoe with a small motion until the bow pointed straight at me. I could feel the focus, even if I couldn't see a face. The calls came again, spaced out, changing each time, never repeating. They weren't loud. They were careful. I glanced up the path for Jessica. It was just darkness and a faint bit of hospital glow. No one else around us. I stood up so fast my chair fell back. My pulse hammered in my ears. I opened my mouth before my brain caught up. "Who are you?" My voice carried across the water and bounced back flat. Nothing moved on the canoe. No answer. The calls came again, a different set, still slow. The wind shifted and pushed a few drops of rain across my neck. I took one step toward the water without meaning to, then stopped. They didn't speak. They made 3 more clustered calls, like a question. Then they turned the canoe around with 2 clean strokes, a smooth 180, and started paddling away downriver. The hull made almost no sound. The hat tilted forward. The canoe slid into a stretch of shadow where the bank leaned over. I watched until I couldn't tell it from the water. It was just gone. Jessica came back with the beer and found me standing with my hands open, breathing hard. The chair was on its side. I took the bag from her and put it on the ground. I told her what happened, step by step. She looked at the river, then back at me, then down the path. I could see the moment her face changed. She didn't think I was messing around. She put the beers into the cooler and zipped it closed. We didn't sit back down. We stood there at the edge a few minutes, straining to hear anything. The fireworks were far and dull. The storm moved around us and flashed without hitting. No other boats came by. I walked up the path a few yards and looked both ways. Nothing. We checked the tent lines and moved the cooler inside the vestibule. We kept our shoes on. We turned off our lantern so our eyes could adjust, then turned it back on because the dark felt worse. All night after that, we were braced for someone to come up the path or splash out of the water. Every crack of brush made us flinch. A couple of times I thought I heard the paddle again, and then realized it was wind against the reeds. Jessica didn't say much. She held her phone with the flashlight ready. I kept a pocket knife open in my palm. I know that wouldn't do much against someone in a boat, but it felt like something. We didn't sleep. Around midnight, a patrol boat moved upriver again with its spotlight sweeping the bank. It never came near our side. I wanted to flag it down, but I didn't even know what to report. A canoe with someone making noises. No crime. No threat spoken. After it passed, the silence felt heavier. We stood inside the tent, facing the river, and listened. By early morning, the storm had blown east. The ground smelled like wet dirt. The river looked normal, dull and wide. We packed fast and didn't talk about staying for breakfast. On the drive back through the hospital lot, we watched the path to the campground and the strip of water we could see between trees. No canoe, no people. Just a couple of trash cans knocked over by wind. We threw our bags into the trunk and left. In the days after, the questions hit all at once. How could it be the same person after 16 years and a move across the country? Maybe it was just a coincidence, someone who knew the calls from somewhere else. But the way the canoe turned and faced me made it feel personal. It felt like they knew exactly where I was. I started looping it in my head. The hat, the no lights, the hush of the paddle, the careful calls. Jessica told me to let it go, but we both kept checking the back patio at night. I stopped taking the trash out after dark. When the wind moved through the trees in the wash, I heard that rhythm and froze. If I had to walk the dog at dusk, I stayed on the lit side of the complex. I cut through the lobby instead of the back gate. We canceled a plan to camp later that month. I said it was the heat. It wasn't. Now, I avoid rivers at night. I avoid places where noise can travel strange. I listen for patterns that change when I pass. If I hear any whistling on a quiet street, I speed up without looking back. I keep thinking maybe if I had pushed further that night, yelled again, or tried to record it, I'd have something. But I didn't. I reacted, and that was it. I didn't want to be the reason someone stepped onto the bank. I've been afraid to camp or be outside in the dark ever since, always listening for those calls. I still have no answers about who was making those sounds, or why they seemed to be targeting me specifically. About 2 years ago, me and my husband David were flying back to LA from Toronto after visiting my parents for Christmas. By the time we landed at LAX, it was late and our bodies felt like sandbags. I'm 35, Canadian, and I do not handle long layovers well. My head was heavy, my eyes dry, and my patience thin. We shuffled off the plane, followed the crowd through the bright tunnel, and kept moving past the holiday ads and the blinking car rental screens. Baggage claim was loud. The carousel belt rattled and the air smelled like jet fuel and old coffee. I stood by the yellow line and watched black suitcases circle like slow fish. David leaned on the handle of our cart and tried not to yawn. When our suitcases finally clunked down, he hoisted the big one, and I grabbed the small one and my purse. Outside, the curb was a mess of horns and voices. We got in the official taxi line, just like always. A couple of guys in hoodies hovered near the edge, asking if we wanted a private car, best price. We ignored them. I've heard too many stories. I kept my purse on my shoulder and my phone in my pocket. The line moved slow. I shifted from foot to foot and watched the cabs pull up. It was almost our turn when the driver the dispatcher pointed to just walked away, like he forgot something and never came back. A yellow taxi rolled in with the engine already running. A man in a dark jacket jumped out fast and went straight for our cart. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask where we were going. He just took the handle of the big suitcase like it belonged to him. I thought it was strange, but we were too tired to argue. I wanted to put my purse in the trunk because I never leave it by my feet. I reached for the lid, and the man snapped at me without even looking. "I'll handle everything," he said, harsh and flat. I pulled my hand back. He shoved our carry-on to one side and kept moving like we were in his way. David tried to keep it light. "Can you open the trunk? We have one more," he said, pointing to the big suitcase. The man looked irritated, almost like a simple sentence was a problem. He just popped the trunk and moved the small bags roughly to make room. Airport noise blurred into a dull roar. I felt the pressure of the line, the push to just get in and go. I had this habit of never getting into taxis first, because of safety concerns from stories I'd heard about kidnappings. I stand outside until the trunk is shut and the doors are unlocked. I keep the door open until David is in. Then I get in. It's a small routine, but it makes me feel like I'm doing something smart when I'm tired. When the driver finally opened the trunk, I caught a glimpse of dark stains on the lining that looked very much like dried blood in the dim light. They were not neat dots. They were smeared patches, finger-length, palm-sized, crusted into the fabric near the latch and along the right corner. There were several stains of different sizes, and some looked relatively fresh compared to others. My mouth went dry. I blinked and leaned an inch closer without thinking. Before I could get a good look, the man quickly threw in our suitcase and slammed the trunk shut. The metal thud made me flinch. He pressed his palm flat against the lid like he was sealing something. Then he turned fast, reached for the rear door, and held it open without making eye contact. The dispatcher called out again, sharper this time, and pointed to the long line. David didn't notice any of it. He had already settled into the back seat, moving over to the far side. He was rubbing his eyes and asking the driver if he could take surface streets because the freeway had been a mess on our last trip. The driver didn't answer. He just leaned in and hit the button for the locks, and then slid in behind the wheel. My stomach felt tight. I looked at the trunk again, at the places where the lining met the metal, and tried to convince myself it was oil or rust or something from spilled wine. It didn't look like oil. It looked brown-red, dry around the edges, and darker in the center. The taxi's license number was painted on the bumper. I told myself to remember it, but the number slipped when I blinked. A man with a stroller glanced at me and sighed. A woman with a neck pillow muttered something under her breath. The air felt hot under the overhang even though the night was cool. I realized I was still standing there with my hand on the door and people were staring. My brain wanted to pause and make sense of the stains, the rush, the driver's irritation. But the line pressed closer, and the dispatcher waved again. The driver tapped the steering wheel with 2 fingers like he was counting. The engine kept that steady hum. The taillights threw a dull red over the silver suitcase that skated past behind us. David looked back at me. He patted the seat with his palm. "Let's go," he said, soft, not seeing my face. It wasn't his fault. He was done. I was done too, just in a different way. I checked my phone, made sure the battery was up, and slid it into my coat pocket where I could feel it with my thumb. I did not look at the trunk again. I reluctantly got into the taxi with my purse on my lap, gripping it tightly throughout the ride. The trip started ugly. The driver pulled away from the curb so hard my shoulder hit the door. He took the first turn without slowing, then punched the gas, then braked short like the pedals were either floor or nothing. My head knocked the headrest twice. The meter clicked up fast. The air inside smelled like stale smoke and something sweet and sour under it. I kept my purse on my lap and my knees together so my phone wouldn't slide. We hit a series of green lights, and he treated each one like a challenge. Left, right, fast merge, horn, brake. I felt nausea creep up from the long travel day and the way he yanked the wheel. I watched the blue dot on my phone. At first it seemed fine. Then the streets started to look wrong. Fewer lights, fewer people. Warehouse walls with graffiti. Chain-link fences with barbed wire rolls on top. We were not heading toward downtown. We were cutting south and east, toward the industrial outskirts. The freeway signs pointed to cities we didn't need. "Why are we going this way?" I asked, loud enough to be heard. He did not react. His shoulders were tight under the jacket. He kept his face forward. The rearview mirror showed only a slice of his cheek and ear. No eye contact. He changed lanes without signal and boxed in a delivery truck. David leaned forward and looked at my phone, then out the window. "Hey, this is wrong," he said. "We told you our hotel. Turn around. We're not paying extra for all this." No response. The engine hummed higher. The car shivered as we hit a rough patch. I thought about the trunk, the stains near the latch, the way his hand pressed the lid. I pictured someone bleeding in the back, dripping while the car bounced. I tried to swallow and couldn't. I unlocked my phone and opened the dialer. I didn't call. I just kept it ready. "Sir," David said, louder now. "You're taking us out of the way. I'll call the police for overcharging. Turn around at the next light." He still sounded like a tired guy angry about money. He didn't see what I saw. The driver gripped the wheel at 10 and 2 and kept cutting through empty blocks. The street lamps were thin here. Shadows on the corners, long truck yards, loading docks. A freight train horn blew somewhere far off and the sound felt heavy. We hit a red light after a fast stretch, and he slammed the brakes so hard my seatbelt bit my chest. The tires squealed a little. He twisted in his seat then, quick and sharp, and snapped at us. "Licensed," he said, voice flat, like a warning. He jabbed a finger toward a plastic holder on the dash with a city emblem and a photo card in it. "See? License. Meter. Sit back." His eyes were dark and stale, no blink. Then he faced forward again and tapped the steering wheel with the same finger he used to point, tick, 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 waiting for the light. I stared at the card. The photo could have been him or not. The name was a blur in the dim. The badge number, the decal, all of it looked official at first glance, but I had no way to check. The light turned green and he shot across the intersection and made a hard U-turn that made the tires complain again. My elbow slipped and I grabbed the seat. I was ready for him to keep going wrong, but he didn't. He headed back toward the brighter streets without a word. After the confrontation with his passengers, the driver turned around and headed in the correct direction toward our hotel. He took the freeway this time. The skyline came back into view, sharp edges against the haze. Traffic thickened and slowed him down. He stopped weaving. He kept both hands on the wheel and stared dead ahead like he was counting exits. I watched the signs for our exit and tracked us on my phone. We were on course now. Maybe he decided loud tourists were not worth it. Maybe the dispatcher had eyes somewhere. Maybe he just wanted the fare with no trouble. I did not try to guess. I kept the dialer open and my thumb on the screen. David sat rigid beside me, jaw tight, one hand on the grab handle above the door. He didn't talk. He watched the road like he could steer with his face. We pulled off the freeway. The streets near our hotel were clean and full of light. Restaurants, valets, planters with little trees, people waiting under heaters. The driver slowed for the first time, smooth now, and slid up to the curb at the canopy. The hotel doors reflected the taxi in bright glass. I tried to look in the trunk again. He popped it fast and stepped back there before I got out. I moved to the rear and lifted my phone light low at my hip, angling it up as casual as I could. The lighting under the canopy was bad for that angle. The trunk held rags, a crumpled fast food bag, a broken umbrella, an oil-stained blanket rolled tight. I could not see the lining near the latch. I took a half step right, but he yanked our big suitcase forward and blocked my view with his body. The lid bobbed on its hinges. David paid the fare with cash, quick, no small talk. He took the suitcase handle, threw me a look that said, "Let's go," and started for the doors. He was eager to be horizontal in a bed and done with it. I closed my phone light and put it away. The driver shut the trunk with the same flat palm, climbed in, and pulled away without waiting for a tip. Inside, the lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and coffee. I still saw those dark smears when I blinked. Maybe they were oil, maybe rust, maybe nothing. I regret not insisting on changing taxis the second it felt wrong. It was late. We were tired. That is how people get picked. We reported the incident to hotel security right after check-in. The guard behind the small desk listened without laughing. He said they had heard similar complaints about unauthorized drivers hanging near LAX, jumping into the line when real drivers were pulled away. He told us to always stick with the official queue, get the car number, and take a clear photo of the plate and the driver ID before the car moves. If they rush you, step back, he said. Real drivers won't fight that. He took down what we remembered. It wasn't much. A yellow car, a dark jacket, a face that wouldn't look at us straight, a maybe name on a badge we couldn't read. No plate photo, no car number. He wrote anyway and said he would pass it to their contact with airport police. He repeated the advice again and added, "If you feel wrong, refuse the ride. Come back inside. Ask for help." David thinks I was paranoid from exhaustion. He says the stains were probably old soda or grease, and the wrong turn was a shortcut that didn't work out. He didn't see the trunk the way I did. He didn't feel the way the car wanted to go empty to empty streets while the meter climbed. I read about taxi safety after that. I learned how unauthorized drivers work the curb, how they watch for families and couples with bags and dead eyes, how they say official without proof, how they wedge in ahead of legit cars. They make money off confusion. Most want a quick fare with a high meter. Some want more. The pieces fit too clean for me. The real driver who disappeared. The smooth swap. The license flashed like a shield. The sudden course correction when we barked. I am not dramatic by nature. I just pay attention now. I keep my purse close. I photograph plates. I ask for the driver's name and say mine out loud back to him. If the trunk lining looks wrong, I do not get in, no matter how many people behind me sigh. I still wonder what would have happened if we'd gone along with the wrong route without protesting. About a week ago, something happened at the middle school where I work as the main office secretary that still has me shaken up. We had just installed video cameras at the main entrance. We did it because we kept getting visitors who lied on the intercom. Before the cameras, people buzzed, said a name and a reason, and we pressed the button to let them in. Anyone could say anything. With the new system, we see faces at the speaker and at the gate. We can zoom in and record. I sit at a desk with 2 monitors, a phone, and the buzzer panel. The front door is thick glass with a metal frame. The gate is outside the small parking lot. The fence runs around the whole campus. Tuesday around noon, when the cafeteria line was finishing up, my desk phone rang. It was one of our parents. She had just dropped off her son, late after a dental appointment. She sounded calm, but hurried. She told me she saw a motorcycle with no license plate circling the block. The rider wore a black ski mask and a dark jacket. Behind him was a van, also without plates. The driver wore a similar mask. They were moving slow along the curb beside our fence, then around to the back by the field, then back out to the front. She said it looked wrong to her. I asked where she saw them last. She said by the crosswalk near the main gate. I wrote it on a yellow sticky note and put the time. I looked up at the new camera feed and the street camera we have. I did not see them at that moment. The sidewalk was empty except for a student walking back from the nurse. I told the parent I would keep an eye out. I thanked her for calling. She hung up. I clicked the record function on the main entrance cam anyway. It was a normal day otherwise. The copy machine was going. Someone had left a box of laminated hall passes on the counter. A stack of early dismissal slips sat in my inbox. The intercom crackled every few minutes with teachers asking for a custodian or a pass. Out the window I could see the flagpole and a row of parked cars. The weather was bright but cold. The gate motor hummed every time a delivery truck came through. Still, I noted what she said. No plates, masks, slow driving. We keep a log of calls and visitors. I wrote it into the logbook. There is a big binder we use, black cover, silver rings. I added the time and details and my initials. Then I checked the outside cameras again. Nothing. I walked to the lobby door and looked through the glass. You can see the sidewalk, the bike rack, and the street trees from there. 2 7th graders passed by on their way to the office. I went back to my chair. At lunch, the noise in the building rises. You can feel it at the front office, like a soft shake in the floor. Around 12:30, kids started moving out to the yard. They carry basketballs and backpacks they forgot to drop. Some eat chips on the way out even though they are not supposed to. The field is on the far side of the lot, behind a second fence. From the street, if you stand in a few spots, you can see through both fences and watch the field. We all know that. We trust the fences and the gates. They are tall. The gate is steel and heavy. A keypad is mounted on the post. Visitors must buzz, then we see them on camera, then we decide. If the story sounds off, we ask for ID and a second check. If it still feels off, we say no and call the number on file. Students are not released without a valid pickup list, ever. That is our rule. At first, we were not too worried. It is a school. People slow down to stare at their phones. People miss a turn and loop the block. We keep calm until there is a reason to do more. I told our clerk to keep an eye on the street camera feed while I finished a stack of forms. I could hear whistles out on the yard. 8th graders play soccer near the fence. Lunch aides watch the 6th and 7th graders closer. 8th graders do not get constant eyes on them. They know the rules by now. Around 1 o'clock, I was stapling permission slips together. I glanced at the monitor like I always do. Quick check, no drama. The motorcycle rolled into frame at the curb by our gate. Same bike as described. Black, older model, no plate on the rear fender. The rider wore a ski mask and a dark helmet on top of it. He stopped right in front of the call button. On the street across from him, a dark van was parked with its engine running. The front plate holder was empty. Through the windshield, I could see a figure at the wheel with something over his face. He pressed the buzzer. The tone rang in the office. I clicked to bring up his camera full screen. The angle looks down from above the button, so you see faces and hands. He looked up into it and waited a beat. Then he said, in a flat voice, that he was there to pick up his child. I could see his gloves on the handlebar. A black backpack was bungee strapped to the seat behind him. The van stayed where it was. A few cars passed, fast, and then the street went quiet again. I felt the room get still, but I kept to the steps we use for every pickup. We have a list. We have a process. We do not open the gate because someone says the word pickup. I clicked the mic on. I told him the office would help him. I asked him to state his name and the name of the student. I watched his eyes through the mask. He did not move his head much. The engine on the bike idled. The van did not move. A soccer ball hit the fence out by the field and rolled along it. Our standard verification is simple. We get the name. We ask for ID at the camera. We compare it to the emergency contact list and the pickup permissions in our system. If the person is not on the list, we refuse and contact the parent on file. If they are on the list, we ask them to wait while we send a staff member to the lobby. We keep the outer gate locked until everything checks out. The camera records the whole time, timestamp visible. Nothing is done alone. 2 people watch if possible. I thought about the call from the parent. No plates, masks, slow driving. The timing lined up. The lunch period meant lots of kids near the fence. From certain windows on the 2nd floor, you can see the yard and the street at the same time. I did not get up. I kept my eyes on the screen and my hand on the mic button. The other monitor showed the yard view in a smaller box. Students were moving in groups. A lunch aide walked with a radio by her shoulder. A delivery truck rolled past the back service gate and kept going. The buzzer light was still lit. The rider waited. He held the bike between his knees and balanced with one boot on the ground. The van's brake lights flicked on, then off. I wrote the time in the log. I noted the description again. I clicked the intercom a 2nd time so he would hear me over the engine noise. I started our standard verification process by asking for his name. He said his name was Robert Johnson. He said it fast, like he was reading it off a screen. I asked for the student name. He said Michael Johnson. I know our roster. We do not have a Michael Johnson. I asked for grade and homeroom. He said 8th grade, Ms. Smith. We do not have a Ms. Smith in 8th. I asked for the mother's name on the contact list. He paused and said, Amanda. No last name. He could not say a birthday. He could not spell the supposed teacher's name when I asked. I kept my voice even. I told him we needed to verify his identity before any pickup. I asked him to hold his ID up to the camera. He looked left and right. He reached into his pocket, then stopped. I said, "Please remove your mask so we can confirm you match the ID." He stared into the lens. His gloved hand went to his chin like he might pull the fabric down. Instead, his eyes flicked past the camera toward the van. The van idled with the nose pointed toward the intersection. I could see a driver inside, head turned toward our gate. The rider's breathing showed in the mask, a small movement at the mouth. I told him again we needed a clear face and a government ID. I also said, "For a faster release, tell me your child's student ID number." He tapped the clutch a little. The engine revved. He did not have an answer to that. I typed "no match" in our notes field and saved the entry. I was aware of the lunch yard on the other monitor, bodies in motion near the fence, but I did not look away from the gate feed. I kept my finger on the mic button. Our clerk stood now at my shoulder, silent, watching. He raised one hand from the handlebar and made a quick motion, 2 fingers and a chop, toward the van. The driver in the van moved at once. Brake lights brightened, then the van rolled forward and angled away from the curb. The motorcycle snapped upright, and the rider kicked the stand-up with his heel. He didn't say another word through the intercom. He twisted the throttle hard. The bike leapt forward and shot down the street. The van followed, tight behind, then jumped lanes and accelerated. I watched them go past the last camera view. Then the screen was empty. I pressed the talk button and heard my own breath in the speaker. I realized I had not called 911 while he stood there. I should have told our clerk to make the call the second the masks and no plate showed on the feed. I grabbed the phone and dialed anyway. I gave the dispatcher our address, the time, the descriptions, the missing plates, the direction of travel. The clerk pulled the DVR export window onto the second monitor. I saved the clip to a thumb drive and labeled it with the date and time. Within minutes, a patrol car rolled up. 2 officers came in through the vestibule. I buzzed them. They asked to see the footage first. I played the clip on the screen, pausing on the rider's build, the black jacket, the gloves, the backpack strap. We printed stills. I handed over the thumb drive. They stepped back out to look at the street and the line of sight through the fence. One officer asked exactly where on the yard you can see the 8th graders from the sidewalk. I pointed to the angles from the elm tree and from the bus zone. He nodded and wrote it down. They took statements. I wrote times from the logbook. I explained the initial call from the parent about the slow loop around the school and the plates missing. They asked if we had any other visitors or deliveries around that time. I showed the sign-in sheet. A copier repair tech came at 10. A milk delivery at 11. Nothing at 1, except them. They said they would patrol more during lunch for the rest of the week. They asked for our bell schedule and the release times. I printed it. We did not get a call back that day. After they left, I sent a message to the principal and the lunch aides that we had an attempted unauthorized pickup. We stayed in normal operations but kept the outer gate locked between 1 and 1:30 unless we recognized a driver. I stood up and walked the lobby, checked the glass for any handprints, checked the lock on the inner door. I called the parent who had warned us and thanked her again. She said she was already home and would watch her street. She described the bike as older, matte black, a loud engine. She said the van had a dent in the rear quarter. The rest of the day, I kept one monitor on the street feed. Nothing else happened. The kids came in from lunch at 1:15. The building got quiet again, just the faint sound of a class changing and the copy machine warming up. I answered a few early dismissals, checked IDs over the camera, matched names to the list, buzzed no one until I saw a clear face and a matching line in our system. The gate stayed shut most of the afternoon. We never heard if they found the bike or the van. The next morning, I called the non-emergency line and added a note to the report with the detail about the backpack on the bike. A week later, the officer who took the case phoned and said they had increased patrols at lunch and at release. He could not share more. I understood. I printed a reminder for staff. Do not open the outer gate without a proper match, no exceptions. I put it above the buzzer panel. What bothers me is not knowing what they wanted inside. If I had buzzed open the outer gate when he first said pickup, the rider could have rolled straight into the lobby. The van could have pulled into our lot and blocked the exit. From there, it is too many paths. An 8th grader near the fence, a door propped with a rock, a quick grab in the confusion. Or it could have been a theft of equipment from the office or the tech room. We have laptops in a cart by the front hall on certain days. The masks and the missing plates say they expected cameras and they wanted to be anonymous. It did not feel random. They were early to lunch, they knew when the yard would be full, and they approached the buzzer exactly when the aides were spread thin. That is not an accident. They had watched at least once before. It makes sense. Our street has spots where you can idle and see down the corridor between the fences to the soccer area. If you are patient and you want faces, you wait for that hour. The new cameras did the job. We could see the rider's height, the build, the gloves, the backpack, and the way he moved. It gave me enough to hold the line without guessing. Still, I made a mistake by not signaling our clerk to call 911 the second I saw the mask and the no plate. That would have been smarter. It is a small thing, but seconds matter when someone is at your gate and you don't know what they plan to do. I think about the chain of events that could have gone bad if I had believed Robert Johnson and Michael Johnson. We have students with common names, yes, but not that one, not here. One click on the buzzer and the situation changes from a video call to a person inside your door. Then it's hands, not policies. I don't like to imagine it, but I do, because that is how you fix the next gap. Now I check the street camera every lunch. I keep the log open and a pen ready. I make sure someone else stands with me at the monitor during busy times. We confirm faces and IDs every time. If the story is off by one detail, we slow it down and verify again. It is not drama. It is just the process. I don't know if they'll try again here. Maybe they got spooked by the camera angle they didn't expect. Maybe they learned how we ask questions. If they come back, it will be cleaner, without obvious masks, with a cleaner story and a name that exists on our list. I hope we see it coming. I hope the patrol car is on the block when they try it. But I keep thinking about that van idling across the street and the rider staring into the lens. And I wonder if they'll come back and try a different approach, maybe without the obvious masks and suspicious behavior. Way back in 2018, I'd been unemployed for about 6 months and was staying with my uncle in this small town in Idaho. At my aunt's family barbecue, I ended up staying way too late, drinking free beer and avoiding conversations about finding work. My cousin Mike, who was supposed to give me a ride home, got tired and wanted to leave around midnight. I decided to stay another hour or two, figuring I could catch a ride with someone else or call an Uber. When I finally decided to leave, I found out the local taxi service had stopped running, and I didn't have money for the expensive late-night rates. All my relatives had already left, so I was facing a long walk down this rural road. The alcohol had dulled my caution, and the 5-mile distance didn't seem that bad at the time. The house sat on the edge of town, where the pavement thinned and the streetlights ended. The last speaker on the picnic table was still playing a scratchy song while my aunt packed coolers and stacked folding chairs. The grill was cold and the yard smelled like wet grass and charcoal. I said thanks, grabbed my jacket, and stepped out past the driveway. The night air hit clean and sharp, colder than I expected, a white fog coming off my breath. My phone said 12:58 and 8% battery. I put it on airplane mode and slid it into my pocket. The jacket was a cheap hoodie and the zipper stuck halfway, so I kept one hand on it as I walked. From the porch, everything looked normal. A few ranch houses, a mailbox line, pumpkins still sagging on porches from Halloween. Past the last intersection, there were only 2 lanes of blacktop and a narrow gravel shoulder that ended in weeds. No sidewalks. No houses for long stretches. I knew the way by day, but at night it felt twice as long. I pulled my hood up, tightened the drawstrings, and started walking on the gravel to keep off the asphalt. A lifted pickup roared by and the wind of it pushed me a step. The taillights disappeared fast, and then it was quiet again. I kept my pace steady and counted steps in sets of 100 to feel like I was moving the distance. The fields on both sides were flat and dark, big squares with stubble sticking up like short nails. Wire fencing ran along them, Wooden posts every 10 or 12 feet, dark shapes against the sky. Here and there, a reflector on a post flashed back my small phone light when I checked the ground. I turned the light off again fast. No point burning the battery. The first stretch was fine. My boots were stiff but warm. I passed a metal gate with a chain and a no trespassing sign that clanked in the breeze. A dry irrigation ditch paralleled the road on my left. The ditch had rocks and sections of culvert pipe and a little fringe of frozen weeds. When I stopped to tighten my laces, I could hear that empty winter sound you get out there at night, like the land was holding its breath. No music now, no voices, just the faint hiss of highway way off, and the tick of cooling metal from the grill behind me. I wasn't brand new to walking at night in the country. I kept to the side so I could see headlights early and step farther into the weeds if I needed to. When a car came from behind, I turned and faced it so whoever was driving could see my hands. A couple cars passed in either direction. No one slowed down. That was normal out here. If you saw someone walking at night on this road, you let them be. I kept moving and watched the reflectors slide by. The road went through tree groves and empty fields with almost no lighting anywhere. Usually you could hear owls, coyotes, and other night animals out here. But tonight there was this unusual silence. I figured it was just the cold weather since it was mid-November and pretty chilly. About a mile into the walk, I noticed rustling in the bushes parallel to the road, like someone or something was moving in the same direction as me. At first, I thought it might be a deer or stray dog, but the sounds didn't go away and clearly followed my movements. When I sped up, the sounds would speed up too. When I stopped, they would also go quiet. I cleared my throat and kept walking, trying not to overthink it. The bushes were low, mostly rabbit brush and cheatgrass with a few scrub pines where the ditch dipped. Every dozen steps I heard a soft push of stems, then a small snap like a twig under a light shoe. I stopped and clicked on my phone for one quick sweep. The beam washed over weeds, fence posts, a rusted soda can in the ditch. Nothing else. No eyes shining back. I turned the light off and stood still. The sound went dead too, as if whatever it was had frozen in place. After 10 seconds, I took a few slow steps and heard it again, same distance off my left. I crossed the road to see if it would break the pattern. The gravel crunched under my boots, and the cold bit through the knees of my jeans when I stepped into taller weeds. The rustling shifted too, not loud, but there, moving with me on the new side. I didn't like that. I slid my keys between my fingers and picked up my pace. Breath pulled sharp in my chest. Somewhere behind the fence, a chain tapped a post. I told myself it was livestock. I told myself anything and kept walking. I started getting nervous, imagining an encounter with a hungry coyote or even a bear. I tried to outrun whatever was following me, almost breaking into a jog. But after a few hundred yards, I heard loud cracking of branches directly behind me. The sound was too strong for a medium-sized animal, and something large had definitely stopped just a few feet from the road. I felt like someone was standing behind my back, watching me intently. Fear overcame common sense, and I slowly turned around to see what was there. In the shadows of the trees stood a tall, thin figure of a person in dark clothing who had obviously been following me. The stranger's height was about 6.5 feet, and I couldn't make out the face in the darkness. The person stood absolutely motionless like a statue, just staring in my direction. I kept the hood up and froze with my feet in the gravel. The ditch between us was shallow, a strip of hard dirt and dead weeds, then the fence line. The figure was inside the fence, one step back from the brush, centered between two posts. No sway, no shuffle, just there. I lifted my phone a little and tapped the button. The weak light blinked and barely reached them. Just a flat line of shadow and sleeves. I didn't see a backpack or anything in their hands. The battery icon flashed red and I killed the screen again. I cleared my throat and said, "Hey," to test if it was a person who needed help, but the words sounded small and wrong in the cold. No answer. Not even a head tilt. The air smelled like dirt and diesel from earlier traffic. My breath fogged and drifted in front of me. I took one slow step backward onto the asphalt and listened for any shift. Nothing. The quiet felt heavy. The last house light I'd passed was far behind me, and the next intersection was a dark line I couldn't reach with my eyes. I didn't hear any more cracking, just that dead silence like the fields were padded. I decided to move. Not fast. I turned my shoulders and eased forward, keeping the figure on my left side view for as long as I could. When I hit the angle where I had to face front, I heard another crack and a dry branch pop, closer to the fence line. I pictured the person stepping over wire. I didn't look. I pushed off and ran. I screamed from shock and terror and ran as fast as I could without looking back or checking if the pursuer was following me. My heart was pounding wildly. There was noise in my ears, and my legs were giving way from fear and alcohol. Only after half a mile did I risk looking back, and the road behind me was empty. I walked the rest of the way home at a fast pace, constantly turning around and listening to every sound. The silence was still deathly quiet, which scared me more than normal night sounds would have. When I got home, I locked all the doors and couldn't fall asleep for a long time, replaying what happened in my head. I understood I had been drinking, but I'd never had hallucinations from beer before in my life. In the kitchen, I turned on the overhead light, and it threw long lines across the linoleum. I set a glass under the tap and let it run until it was cold. My hands shook and I had to set the glass down. I went window to window and checked the latches. Front door, back door, the slider to the deck. I pulled the curtains tight. At the sink, I kept listening for tire noise or footsteps in the yard. Anything. But the house just clicked and settled like normal. The clock on the microwave said 2:04. I stood there and watched the numbers change to 2:05 and then 2:06 and felt stupid counting them. I wanted to wake my uncle, but he had an early shift, and he'd already done enough letting me stay. I kept it quiet. I plugged my phone in, and the screen lit the room and made me jump at my own reflection in the glass. I thought about calling Mike. Then I thought about explaining why I stayed and why I walked and decided not to. I opened the hall closet and took out the heavy flashlight he keeps by the door. It's the metal kind with a thick head. I set it on the table and sat where I could see both the front door and the back door. The heater kicked on and hummed through the vents. The hum made the silence worse when it shut off again. Around 3, I got up and checked the backyard through a crack in the curtain. The deck was covered in frost. The lawn looked like a flat white blanket. Nothing moved. No prints near the steps. I held the curtain and scanned left to right, slow, to keep my eyes from playing tricks. I didn't see anyone by the fence. I checked the front again the same way. Just the empty street and a street light a block down glowing over nothing. I sat back at the table and put my head on my arms, but I didn't sleep. When the first light came through the blinds, I finally felt my jaw unclench. By morning, the whole thing felt like it happened in a tunnel. I knew the road. I knew the fences. I knew I had seen someone. I could still picture the exact spot by the fence post. I could still hear that branch popping like a knuckle. I kept going back through it, step by step. No good reason for anyone to be in that field so late. No good reason to track a random guy. No reason to stop and stare like that. I didn't tell my aunt. I didn't want a lecture or a comment about beer. I threw up the hood of my sweatshirt and pretended to scroll my phone until the house settled into its daytime noise. When my uncle got home that night, I asked if I could borrow his truck for a few days. He tossed me the keys and said, "Top her off." I nodded. I didn't go back down that road, not even in daylight. When I needed to get to town, I took the long way. If someone offered a ride, I took it, even if they had to rearrange seats or make an extra stop. If I had to wait 30 minutes for someone, I waited. I kept the flashlight by the door and a spare in my backpack. I made small changes without talking about it. To this day, I don't know who that was or why they followed me down that dark road. Maybe it was a local homeless person or drug addict, or maybe someone planning to rob a lone pedestrian. I never walk that road alone in the dark anymore, and always ask for rides home even when it's inconvenient for relatives. The height and stillness of that figure still gives me chills when I think about it. Sometimes I wonder if it was just someone playing a prank, but the way they moved through the woods so quietly seemed too skilled. That encounter changed how I think about walking alone at night in rural areas. During spring break of my sophomore year, my buddy Kyle convinced me to join him in Miami Beach for the week. Kyle didn't work or go to school, just lived off his wealthy parents' money, and instead of 1 week at the beach, he'd been there the entire season. He wanted company and promised to give me a ride back to campus when the week was over. I only had enough cash for a one-way bus if I wanted spending money for the actual vacation. What Kyle failed to mention until I got there was that he'd driven down on his dad's Harley Davidson. If I wanted to get home, it was going to be on the back of that motorcycle, which wasn't what I'd signed up for. But if I spent my remaining money on a plane ticket home, I wouldn't be able to enjoy spring break at all. After 5 great days in Miami, we had to start the 2-day ride back to make it to classes on time. Miami made the choice harder. We stayed in a cramped studio 2 blocks from the sand, a room with a bent balcony rail and an AC that rattled. I slept on a thin couch that sagged. Kyle slept late, partied late, and never seemed tired. In the mornings, we watched joggers with neon shoes. The Harley sat at the curb with salt on the chrome. I kept telling myself it was fine. I could ride one day and bus home if I had to. But every time I looked at the bike, I pictured hours of wind and blind spots and my hands going numb around a strap that didn't exist. We spent the money slow. I ate cheap sandwiches and drank water. Kyle bought overpriced tacos and handed out bills like flyers. He told everyone we were riding north and laughed when I checked the weather. I'd never ridden more than an hour on a bike, and that was on a quiet road near campus. I kept thinking about buses and warm seats and a roof. Every time I thought about buying a ticket, I pictured going home broke while everyone else posted beach photos. So I stayed, and when the 5th morning came, I stopped arguing with myself. On the 5th morning, we packed light. Kyle cinched his backpack under a cargo net, then tossed me the spare helmet. The strap was frayed near the buckle. I pulled on a denim jacket over a hoodie and stuffed my wallet into the inner pocket. He was grinning like the ride was the fun part. He revved the engine and made a tourist couple look over. I climbed on behind him and found the foot pegs. The seat felt narrow and slick, and the pipes pulsed against my calves. Getting out of Miami was heat and horns. Buses grumbled and taxis cut across lanes. The wind pushed at my jaw. We slipped between cars when traffic stalled, then idled behind a dump truck when it moved again. Kyle was smooth, not reckless, but he liked speed the second there was open space. At a red light, I checked the rear tire and chain and told myself I knew what I was looking at. My stomach felt empty, which helped. I kept my eyes moving. Mirrors, fenders, brake lights, the shiny patch that means oil. By lunch, we were on a clean stretch of highway. Palms leaned over fences, and billboards sold fireworks and lawyers. The helmet visor wouldn't stay up and kept slapping shut, so I rode with a slit of light and the smell of fuel. Kyle pointed at a rest stop and we pulled in to stretch. I peeled off the helmet. My hair was damp with sweat. He asked if I was good. I said, "Yeah, Tape for the visor would help. He laughed and found a roll in his bag. We wrapped it tight and drank warm water from a vending machine. We stopped for the night at a cheap motel by an exit with chain restaurants and a gas station. The hallway smelled like bleach, and the carpet had stains. Kyle flipped channels while I set my alarm and plugged in my charger. We ate bad pasta nearby and talked about nothing because we didn't want to talk about the ride. Outside, the air felt heavy and still. I checked the radar and saw a smear of storms drifting our way. Kyle shrugged and said, "We'll beat it." Trucks woke me before my alarm. The sky was a pale lid over everything. The asphalt looked dull, like it had already soaked up the day. We loaded the bike, tightened straps, and checked the lights. My fingers felt clumsy in the cold. I downed gas station coffee that tasted burned and bit into an old donut. The clerk said, "Be careful," then looked at our helmets and went quiet. On the ramp back to the highway, the wind tugged at my shoulder. The air had that press to it, like something heavy was leaning down. We left pretty early in the day, and by 2 p.m. we'd made it to Central Florida. That's when the weather started getting really ominous. The sky darkened incredibly fast as the most threatening storm clouds I'd ever seen began rolling in overhead. These weren't normal gray clouds. They were this weird greenish-black color that completely blocked out the sun. It was the middle of spring, but by 4 o'clock it was pitch dark outside like nighttime. The only good thing was that it wasn't raining yet, so we wanted to cover as much distance as possible before having to find a motel. I'd never seen anything like those clouds in my entire life. I really can't describe how terrifying they looked. It was like they were being pushed down on top of us with some kind of purpose. When they started forming these spinning funnel shapes right above our heads, I got genuinely scared. I didn't know if that meant a tornado was forming, but it definitely wasn't a good sign either way. Finally, the storm hit with heavy rain and lightning. Riding into it felt like leaning into sand blasting. Every raindrop hit my cheeks and nose like small rocks, and needles ran over my arms and neck. The wind shoved at us from the left, then the right, and the bike wobbled as Kyle corrected. Cars slowed and flicked hazards. A white pickup hydroplaned, slid, then caught itself. Lightning strobed across the sky and turned the road white for a second. The thunder landed right after, a hard crack in my chest. I kept one hand on Kyle's jacket and the other clamped on the grab rail, trying not to think about how narrow the tire patch was between us and the asphalt. I could taste metal. Water pushed under my visor even with the tape. The cold went through my gloves, and my fingers felt numb and clumsy. My knees pressed into the seat to stay steady each time a gust hit. The lane lines disappeared beneath a glass of water, and we followed taillights like they were buoys. A big rig passed and threw a wall of spray that blinded us for 2 breaths. Kyle eased off but didn't pull over. He looked solid in front of me, head down against the wind, shoulders square, the red of his brake light reflecting on his wet jacket. A blue sign showed through the dark like a washed-out TV screen. Gas, food, lodging. I read the words, Hampton Inn, through running water. The exit arrow came fast on the right. Kyle tilted his helmet toward it and shouted a word I barely caught. Stop? I thought about a hot room and dry socks. I thought about my face burning and my neck stiffening. But I also thought about how Kyle moved through life like nothing could push him, and how I didn't want to be the one to tap out first. No, let's see how much further we can make it, I yelled, mouth close to his ear. The wind tore the edges off the words, but he got it. He barked a short laugh and rolled the throttle. The tires hummed on the wet road. The sky above us was that low green black, and the cloud shapes over the median twisted into funnels that thinned and broke. My helmet vibrated so hard my vision jumped at the edges. We rode past a wooden overpass that boomed with the rain like someone dropping boards. Debris slid across the highway, a palm frond, then a plastic bin lid, then a flat sheet that flipped like a card. A sedan with hazards creeping in the shoulder made a wake we had to cut. I started counting the seconds between lightning and thunder without meaning to. 1, 2. Crack. It didn't help. The wind pressed on my back and then let go. We kept going because pulling over in that mess felt worse, like becoming a target for whatever might cross the lanes next. Another blue sign appeared through the gray. Best Western. Gas stations. Food. Kyle pointed again, and this time his hand stayed out until I nodded. We took the ramp slow, tires feathering over standing water. The wind dropped a little as trees around the exit pocketed some of it. Parking lot lights flickered over puddles and shopping carts blown into curbs. The hotel had a low roof and tan walls with dark rectangles where the rain ran. The automatic door shuddered when a gust pressed it, then slid open. We checked in with our jackets dripping onto the mat. The clerk slid 2 key cards across in little sleeves and said, "You guys ride in this?" Kyle said, "Yeah." Water running off his chin strap. The elevator was slow. The carpet smelled like damp. In the room, the air conditioner under the window rattled and blew cold air that smelled like dust. 2 full beds, a bolted-down TV, a brown headboard, a painting of a pier. The lamp had a crooked shade. Kyle turned on the weather. I grabbed a towel and headed for the bathroom. The shower beat on my back and turned my hands pink. Steam curled up and the mirror bloomed white. The curtain stuck to my shin and the rod creaked with each gust that hit the window. When I stepped out, I could still hear the TV through the fan. The news anchor's voice had that rapid, careful tone. I opened the door with the towel over my shoulders. Kyle didn't turn. He held the remote and stared. The red crawl at the bottom said, "Severe weather emergency." A map showed a block of red and purple over our route. They broke in with live coverage from the exact stretch we had just passed. The camera shook as the wind hit. You could see the loop of an exit, the gas station canopy flapping, the sign for a Hampton Inn twisted. The reporter said, "Confirmed tornado touchdown," and then gave a time. 30 minutes ago. My brain did the plain math. 30 minutes. The same exit where Kyle had asked if we wanted to get off. The thought lined up with a hard click that made my mouth go dry. They cut to aerial footage. The Hampton Inn looked like a dollhouse ripped open. Rooms showed along the side, mattresses half out the windows, curtains whipping. The metal sign had snapped. Cars had windows blown out and lay at angles like dropped toys. Flashing lights bounced off wet concrete. People moved in a line across the parking lot holding blankets. The camera found the lobby doors folded in like foil. A luggage cart sat bent on one wheel. Kyle lowered the volume and said, "Quiet. We would have been in that lobby." His voice sounded flat. He put the remote down like it might crack. We both stared at the screen while the anchor listed injuries and warned people to stay off the highway. A firefighter in a yellow coat talked to the camera, rain hitting his helmet in little white sparks. Another shot showed a stairwell blocked by cinder blocks and insulation. The word tornado sat in the lower corner of the screen and didn't move. The hotel we'd almost stayed at was shown as completely destroyed. If we'd taken that exit an hour ago like Kyle suggested, we would have been checking in when that tornado tore through the building. We sat there and realized how close we'd come to being killed. It felt mechanical, facts slotted into place. My decision to keep riding, made mostly because I didn't want to seem weak, had probably saved both our lives. I had wanted out of that storm so badly, but the idea of quitting in front of Kyle had been louder. We kept the TV on and didn't talk much. The air unit kicked on and off with a click. Rain rattled on the window and wind hummed under the door. Somewhere down the hall, a kid cried and then stopped. The anchor repeated the same footage with the same yellow ticker. They showed the path on a wider map, a hook over counties I barely knew. I turned our helmets so the visors faced up. Water dripped from mine and made a dark coin on the desk. Kyle called his dad and said we were fine. He kept it short. I texted our group chat that we were safe and put the phone face down. The towels made small dark ovals on the carpet. We flipped channels and all of them showed the same broken hotel. The words "direct hit" and "miracle" came up. The anchor said there had been warnings and that more storms might follow inland. Sirens passed somewhere outside and then faded. Hours went by like that. The parking lot lights buzzed through the glass. The crawl updated numbers and names. The reporter interviewed a guest who said he had been on the second floor when the windows blew. He held a blanket around his shoulders and kept blinking. Kyle didn't make a joke. He watched with his jaw tight and then drew the curtains together until they overlapped. I don't have a big takeaway. We were two dumb kids who rode into a storm and got lucky. I still can't explain what made me tell him to keep going at that exact moment. Maybe pride. Maybe panic. I know what I saw on that screen. And I know where we would have been. We watched the news coverage for hours, seeing the complete devastation at that Hampton Inn and the surrounding area. I'm grateful every day for that split-second decision that changed everything. When I was 11, I was taking art classes at this community center in the Phoenix suburbs. My name is Sophia. The building was low and beige with a mural of hands holding paintbrushes by the front door. Inside, the halls smelled like tempera paint and old paper. Class ended at 4:30. I packed my sketch pad, washed the blue stain off my fingers, and waited on the metal bench by the entrance. Wind pushed grit across the sidewalk. The flag on the pole snapped hard enough to make a clack. Other kids got into cars and left. The instructor locked up the studio and waved once before heading to her car. It was quiet except for traffic on the main road and the whir of an old vending machine humming behind the glass. I checked the lobby clock and then the light outside. I didn't have a phone back then. Mom worked at a clinic, and if shift change ran long, she was late. That was normal. I told myself it was just one of those days. By 4:45, the lobby lights went to that dim setting they used before closing. The front desk had a box of lost and found scarves, a chipped mug, and a stack of flyers for yoga classes. I did a loop between the bench and the front door to warm up. Cold air came in every time the automatic doors slid open. A scrap of paper blew across the tiled floor and stuck by my shoe. When I looked up, it was almost 5. A white Toyota minivan pulled up right in front, clean as a catalog car. The kind with a sunshade folded on the dashboard and a booster seat clipped in the back. The window rolled down with a soft buzz. The driver leaned toward me like he didn't want to raise his voice in the wind and said, "You waiting for your parents?" I said yes. I told him my mom was running late. He nodded. He had plain glasses and a neat haircut. His shirt was a tidy polo, no stains, a light jacket on top. He looked like someone's dad who knew where everything was in his garage. He said, "You're Sophia, right?" He said my name like he'd said it before. "I'm Tom," he added. "Your mom asked me to get you. She got an emergency call at work." He talked in that steady way people use when they have to explain things to kids and don't want to scare them. He said he worked with my mom at the same clinic. He said traffic had been bad, and she didn't want me waiting outside with the wind and the building closing. He told me he knew our neighborhood and everything. He angled his hand toward the van door without pushing. His tone was easy. He kept one hand on the wheel. I didn't move right away. I looked at the empty hall, the lights going low, and the desk with no one behind it. I could see my breath when the door opened again and shut. A newspaper skated down the sidewalk, flapped, and caught on the curb. Tom didn't rush me. He just said, "We'll get you home. she's tied up. That happens. He said he'd been at the clinic during shift change. He mentioned something normal about how nurses swap charts and everyone leaves late. It sounded right. It sounded like the way my mom talked about work when she was tired and hungry at the same time. He knew my name. He knew my mom was a nurse. He knew about her hours. I looked at the clock again, then back at the parking lot. The instructor's car taillights were gone. The wind made the flag snap again, louder, and my fingers felt stiff. It was getting colder by the minute. The community center's automatic lights flickered in the hedge and buzzed on. I didn't want to be the last person sitting on a bench in a dark glass box. I didn't want to be the kid who made my mom feel worse after a bad day. I walked closer to the van. I checked the back seat through the glass. There were crumbs around the booster and a tote bag folded by the floor mat. The car smelled like the little tree air freshener and coffee. The heater was on low. Tom leaned over to pop the lock. He didn't smile big or act pushy. He said, "Let's get you out of the wind." I wasn't good at reading people then, but nothing jumped out like a warning. I made a choice that fit the facts I had. I climbed in. I clicked the seatbelt because that is what you do, and the belt felt cold across my jacket. Tom eased the van away from the curb like he'd just dropped someone off. He used his blinker. He kept both hands on the wheel. We rolled past the empty tennis courts, past the low wall with painted tiles, past the community room C sign. He asked how the class went and if we still did charcoal sketches first. I said yes. He said he used to draw cars when he was a kid and always put the wheels too small. It was basic talk, the kind you do to fill space. It made the drive sound normal. For the first few minutes, he went the same direction we always took home. Right at the light, left at the grocery with the red letters, straight through the next two stop signs. He didn't drive fast. He didn't make sudden turns. His hands were steady. He asked what school I went to and if I liked my teacher. He said he had to learn the names of all the kids on his niece's soccer team once, and it took him a week. It felt like the kind of adult who helps out sometimes. Then the pattern changed. We reached the place where we usually turn toward our street. Tom stayed in the middle lane. He put his blinker on for the ramp instead. I watched the arrow sign for our turn slip by on my right. I said, "This isn't our way." I didn't say it loud. I didn't say it mean. Just the fact. "We need to stop by a pharmacy," he said, keeping his eyes on the road. "On the other side of town. It's for your mom. They only have it there." The words came out even. He lifted one hand from the wheel and set it back. 2 minutes, he said. Then straight home. The ramp curved up, and the noise changed. Wind hit the sides of the van harder. The freeway opened like a wide gray river with lanes stacked in lines under a white sky. Signs flashed green with exit numbers and arrows. The lanes filled with cars pushing air that made a constant low roar. We merged. Tom checked his mirrors. He did not look at me. He kept just under the speed limit, and then a little above it. The city fell behind in small pieces. A water tower, a strip mall, a row of palm trees that all looked the same, and then were gone. I watched the skyline shrink in the rear window, and then I faced forward. The heater dried the inside of my nose. The smell of air freshener got sharper. I knew the pharmacies near our house. We didn't go to the other side of town for that. The exits we passed weren't ours. The houses thinned out. Blocks turned into sound walls and long fences around empty lots. The sun slid sideways and made a white glare on the windshield. I didn't talk for a minute. I counted 3 more exits, and none of them matched the ones we used. Tom kept a steady grip. Once he reached to adjust the vents, he didn't look nervous. He didn't look excited. He looked like someone driving on a schedule. My chest felt tight, like when you run and stop too fast. I thought of my mom standing by the front desk at the clinic with a phone in her hand, looking at the time, looking at the door. A small idea pushed hard in my head. Call her. I need to call my mom, I said. Can I use your phone? I held my hands still on my knees so he could see I wasn't reaching for anything. I said it like a question and not like a fight. My cell battery's dead, he said. I started crying and told him to take me home right now. My voice shook and I wiped my face with my sleeve. The seatbelt cut into my shoulder. Take me home, I said again, louder. His jaw flexed. He didn't pretend to be nice anymore. He said, sharp and flat, if you don't stop, I'll drop you off in the middle of nowhere. The words hit me like cold water. His tone was different. No smile voice, no soft talk, just warning. Cars blasted past in the fast lane. The wind thumped the side of the van. A driver in a pickup glanced over. Another car hovered near our rear bumper, then moved up and stuck by our side. My face was red and wet. I couldn't stop the noise coming out of my mouth. Tom's hand tightened on the wheel. He flicked his eyes at me once, hard. The freeway curved. The noise mounted and dropped like waves. Then the brake lights ahead glowed all at once. Traffic stacked up near a merge. We rolled down, slower, slower, to a crawl. The van shuddered as he tapped the brakes. A semi coughed somewhere behind us. I felt the belt across my chest. I looked at the handle, at the little silver lock pin, at the seam of the door. Each part was just a thing. My head went quiet. I pressed the red button. The belt snapped back and burned my neck. He jerked his head toward me. "What are you doing?" he said, but not loud. I didn't answer. I wrapped my hand around the handle. The latch felt greasy from skin. I pulled. The door popped and the wind grabbed it. Tires hissed on wet-looking pavement even though it wasn't wet. We were barely moving. Maybe 5, maybe 10. I didn't wait. I slid and half fell out. My shoes hit and skidded. My knees slammed into rough asphalt. Skin tore. I rolled on my hip and palm. The world tilted and jumped. The sting was bright and hot. My backpack strap ripped and the bag tumbled into the lane and flipped twice. A horn blew long and loud right behind my head, and a shadow of a bumper filled my sight. A sedan next to me screeched. The front end dipped. Rubber burned and the smell was thick and sour. The car stopped a foot from my legs. The driver leaned on the horn again and threw the shifter into park. I crawled on my elbows to the shoulder. My hands left smears. Grit stuck to blood. The van I had been in jerked forward, paused like maybe he'd stop, then moved again. He slid into the next gap and vanished under a line of truck trailers. No brake lights, no turn, just gone. The driver who stopped was a woman in a blue hoodie. She threw open her door and crouched beside me without touching me. "Don't move," she said. Her voice shook, but she kept it low. She looked over her shoulder at the flow of cars, then pulled her phone, thumb already pressing. "I'm calling 911. Another car pulled onto the shoulder behind her. Someone else got out and waved both arms for traffic to keep clear. I sat back against the concrete barrier. The world was noisy but far away. The woman asked my name. I told her. She asked if anything felt broken. I moved my fingers and ankles. Pain shot up, but nothing snapped. My knees were raw. My right palm had little stones stuck in it. A truck flew by and pushed a dirty gust over us. The woman put her hoodie on my shoulders and kept talking into her phone. "She jumped out," she told the dispatcher. "No, I don't think he stopped. White minivan, Toyota." He kept going. A man ran up holding a basic first aid kit from his trunk. He offered gauze pads. He didn't press them on me, just handed them and said, "Hold that there." I pressed them to my knees and palm. Everything went sticky and white. Someone asked if anyone saw the plate. People shook their heads. I only saw the shape, the man said. Traffic. A siren started far off and came closer, jumping between lanes. The patrol car arrived first, lights spinning. An officer parked behind the cars on the shoulder and set flares. He knelt down to my level, looked at my face, then at my knees. He asked simple questions. How old are you? What's your mom's name? Where were you coming from? I answered as straight as I could. He asked, Did he touch you? I said no. He asked if I was dizzy. I said a little. He told me to keep my head still. The ambulance pulled in with a heavy hum. The paramedics slid me onto a board and lifted me in. The inside smelled like plastic and antiseptic. They rinsed my cuts with something cool that stung and stuck butterfly bandages over the worst parts. One of them wrote numbers on a chart and said them out loud. Pulse 98. BP fine. He glanced at the officer, who climbed up to say he'd meet us at the ER. We drove to the hospital with the siren off. I stared at the ceiling and counted the screws in the panel above the stretcher. At the ER, a nurse cleaned my hands with iodine. The brown ran in streaks. She snipped a little thread from my backpack strap with tiny scissors and put it in a bag with my name. An officer stood by the door with his notebook open. He waited until the nurse finished taping gauze before he asked more. He kept it plain. What did he look like? How old? Height? Clothes? I said middle-aged, glasses, neat haircut, polo shirt, light jacket. He wrote each thing like a separate line. He asked what he said to me. I told him the words. He nodded once. He asked if I knew anyone named Tom at my mom's work. I said no. My mom got there fast and almost ran into the curtain. She grabbed my shoulders too hard and then loosened her hands. I didn't send anybody, she said. I don't know a Tom. Her face looked empty, and then full, and then empty again. The officer spoke soft to her, and then firm. He asked the same questions. He asked if any coworker drove a white Toyota minivan. She shook her head. She called her charge nurse and confirmed no one knew that name. Her hands shook when she held my wrist. The police checked traffic cameras and the city-owned ones near the on-ramps. Later, they told us the cameras by that stretch were down for maintenance that week. The angle from the private lot by the billboard didn't catch the lane we needed. No one had a plate. My description matched a lot of men. The booster seat didn't help either. The officer said, "We believe this was an attempted abduction." He said the person likely watched me leave class and timed it. He said it happens. He didn't dress it up. They discharged me with ointment, fresh bandages, and a paper with care steps. At home, we put a towel over my pillow because of the iodine smell. My knees pulsed when I bent them. Mom made 3 calls, then 10. The next morning, she met with the community center director. Papers got signed. Names got put on a list. Her voice stayed even. After that day, my parents never left me waiting alone. They came early and watched from the parking lot. If they were late, I waited inside with staff, not by the doors. My school and the community center stamped a rule on my file. No release to anyone unless my mother signed ahead, in person, with ID. It became normal. People checked. People asked. It saved time to be strict. I hear his voice sometimes when I think about it. That switch from friendly to cold, it was like a door slamming inside a hallway. I'm grateful I moved without debating it for an hour. I know I could have died under a wheel. I also know what was waiting if I stayed. The thought is straightforward. I don't spend time guessing his reasons. 2 short thoughts, then I shut it off. He had a plan, and I interrupted it. Maybe he watched other kids. Maybe he tried before. I can't tell you. I gave the police everything I had, and it wasn't enough to find him. The lesson I kept is small and practical. If something is wrong, act with your body first. Ask for a phone. Make noise. Change the space you're in. Adults can be wrong. Clothes and tone don't mean anything. I was 11. I was also paying attention. Years later, I still avoid white minivans on the freeway without meaning to. My hands tense on the wheel. I shake it off, check my mirrors, and keep going. During the summer of 2019, I was working at a temporary placement center for people with mental health disorders. It was a 12-bed facility where patients were sent after discharge from hospitals or to avoid hospitalization in the first place. I was 29 and a social worker. On weekends, I often worked alone during the night shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The building was a one-story rectangle, a small lobby, a glassed workstation with a desk and a wall clock, then a straight hallway with 6 rooms on each side, a med room at the end, and a side office with a thin door and a squeaky hinge. The doors had metal plates from shoulder height down. We had cameras in the hallway, a cordless phone, a radio on my belt, and a red panic button under the desk that dialed a security line. One Friday evening, we received a new patient, Derek, 35, antisocial personality disorder, fresh out of prison for aggravated assault. He had a gym bag with 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, and a plastic folder of paperwork from Doc. During intake, he made a couple of crude comments about my body. I warned him about facility rules, no harassment, no boundary testing, immediate discharge if there were threats. He dropped his eyes, nodded, and his tone went flat. I finished the standard admission: vitals, property search, medication log, orientation to rules and schedule. I thought there wouldn't be any problems. Quiet hours started at 11. Most rooms had doors cracked for checks. Around midnight, while I was typing case notes, Derek came out barefoot and stood at the corner of my workstation, just outside the line where patients weren't allowed. He asked if I was working alone. I looked at the clock, 12:04. The hallway lights ran at half brightness, and the vending machine hummed in the lobby. I kept my hands on the keyboard and told him nights were quiet and that staff rotated. He leaned closer, elbows on the half wall like he belonged there. He smiled without showing teeth and asked again, lower, "You alone tonight?" I shifted the radio clip on my belt so it was visible and told him he needed to head back to his room. He pointed at the office door and said he'd seen the light off. His voice had that bored edge I hear in guys who push until someone pushes back. I told him he'd get an incident if he loitered at the desk. He didn't move, just rested his chin on his wrist and watched me like I was a TV. I could smell laundry soap and a faint jail smell that never goes away, like old plastic and sweat. After a few seconds, he said, "You got nice hands," and laughed. I picked up the cordless and dialed the next office on purpose so he could see, even though I didn't need to yet. He backed off, palms up, and walked down the hall slow, touching the plates of each door with his fingers as he passed. I logged the interaction and kept the radio on scan. Fortunately, my colleague Brian was in the next office helping with paperwork. I didn't want Derek thinking no one would check him, so I went straight over and told Brian exactly what happened. The desk loitering, the comments, the question about me being alone. Brian is a big guy but calm, and he walked down the hall with his keys jangling on his belt like a little warning bell. He asked Derek to step out by the linen closet and told him, clear and calm, that disrespect would get him removed from the program. "Repeats mean discharge," Brian said. "You want housing, you follow the rules." Derek stared at the floor, shrugged, then said he understood. He went back to his room and closed the door. We finished notes and made rounds. Halls stayed quiet until changeover. At 7, I handed off to Days and went home to sleep a few hours. The next morning I was assigned a day shift, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and I came back with coffee and my badge lanyard tucked into my shirt. Brian was off-site by then. We had 3 morning meds and 1 PRN. At 9, I went to wake Marcus for his scheduled medications. He was always slow to get up. Marcus's room was the last door on the right, next to the med room with the keypad lock that stuck if you pressed too fast. I knocked twice and called his name, then knocked again because he liked to pretend he didn't hear. I could hear a TV from another room and showers running. As I waited there with the medcart keys in my pocket, Derek stepped out from a doorway behind me and moved up the hall with his hands in his sweatshirt. He stopped 2 feet away, close enough that I could see a little nick on his cheek from shaving. He said he wasn't happy I told my colleague about him. His tone was flat, not loud, and he stood at a slight angle so he could see the whole hallway, like he'd practiced it. I kept my shoulders square to Marcus's door and said we'd already discussed rules. He repeated that I had no right to talk to Brian. I could feel the dead air in the hall, the way sound travels when every other door is closed. The only movement was a dust strand in the beam of a ceiling light. I told myself to keep it boring, keep it procedural. I glanced at my watch, then at his hands, then at the medroom keypad. Marcus didn't answer the door. The clock ticked in the office behind me. Derek's jaw flexed once. I shifted my stance so my back wasn't to the hallway. I reminded him about the confidentiality rules I had explained the day before. Derek didn't like that I said the word confidentiality. He stepped closer, fast, and I felt his chest almost touching my shoulder. I backed up a half step and hit the door frame of Marcus's room. He put his forearm on the wall next to my head and angled his body to block me in. The metal plate on the door was cold against my arm. I could see a rash scar on his wrist and 2 faded prison tattoos near his elbow. He lowered his face so I caught the smell of stale coffee and mint gum. "Don't run your mouth," he said. I kept my hands where he could see them. I told him to step back and reminded him again about the rules. He pushed a little more, not a full shove, just pressure so I was pinned to the wall. The hallway camera sat in its dome above us. I shifted my hips to create space, but he leaned in and flattened it. The hinge on Marcus's door clicked, then the handle turned. Marcus opened the door in socks and a t-shirt, eyes puffy from sleep, beard flattened on one side. He took one look at Derek's arm near my head and moved forward without pausing. He's a big man, heavy shoulders, slow from meds, but when he's awake, he's steady. He stepped between us, his chest to Derek's chest, and the pressure on my side dropped. "Back off," he said, low and clear. "Leave her alone." Derek looked at him like he was surprised Marcus would even speak. Marcus planted his feet, bare toes spread on the tile, and put his hand on Derek's sternum, open palm, not a punch. "Back to your room," Marcus said. Derek's mouth twitched, then his eyes flicked toward the camera. He took one step back, then another. He dropped his arms, rolled his shoulders, and gave me a look that said this wasn't over, then turned and walked down the hall. His door shut soft. I pulled the medcart key from my pocket with a shaky grip, and then put it back because it made no sense to unlock anything right then. I told Marcus thank you. He nodded twice and leaned on the doorframe like the burst of energy was over. I asked if he was okay and handed him the small cup of morning meds after I finally unlocked the cart. He swallowed them with water from the paper cone and went back in his room. I walked fast to the workstation and picked up the cordless. I called my supervisor. I gave exact details: time, location, positions, words, the physical contact, camera angle. She listened, then said to document the encounter in the incident log and in his chart. She said no need to call police or mobile crisis unless there was a direct threat or new incident. "Continue the shift," she said. Keep eyes on him. I wrote the incident report in clear language and printed a copy for the overnight file. I checked the panic button under the desk, just to feel it there. The hall went quiet again except for the vending machine. The rest of the shift I kept moving. I did room checks on schedule and made sure I was never cornered. Derek kept his door closed most of the time. Once, I saw the edge of his face at the crack when I passed, just his eye watching out. He came out for lunch and took a tray to the table closest to the med room, then picked up and moved to the table with the clearest line to the desk. He didn't say anything. He looked at the TV in the lounge but not at what was on it. When I walked to the supply closet, he stood up like he might follow, then stayed seated when a peer stepped into the hall. I could feel the attention like heat even when he didn't move. I kept the radio on my belt and told myself to keep the rhythms normal. Meds, chores list, smoke break schedule, rounds. At 2, I took calls from a case manager about another client's housing. At 3, I did the daily inventory on the locked drawer with sharps and signed the sheet. When my colleague came in for the evening shift, I waited for her in the lobby. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I laid out the timeline and the phrases he used, the way he leaned in, where my back hit the wall, where Marcus was standing. I pointed down the hall and showed her the exact spot. I told her he was avoiding direct contact now but tracking movement. I told her which camera would show the angle and which one wouldn't. I asked her to keep the office door propped and not to go into the med room without a second staff near the keypad. She nodded and wrote notes on a pad with the time and the room numbers. We reviewed the sign-out sheet and the schedule for showers and laundry. She said she would call the on-call if anything else happened. I left when she took the desk, but I looked back through the glass before I went out to make sure she had the radio clipped on. A week later, I got a message that Derek was being transferred to a different facility. It wasn't because of my report alone. 2 other patients had submitted complaints to staff about his comments to them, and one said he watched the female staff like a guard does count. The administrator signed a transfer to a partner site with more security. I saw the transport van pull up while I was finishing group notes. Derek loaded his gym bag and folder, glanced at the window, and got in without a scene. I filed my last notes and signed off. I turned in my resignation a month later. I wrote that we needed double coverage on days, working panic buttons, and a standing rule for law enforcement when staff were trapped or cornered. I wrote that the cameras needed blind spot audits. I handed the letter to HR and the program director. They said they would review policies. I boxed my desk photos, extra lanyard clips, and a coffee mug. I walked the hallway one last time, counted doors like I always did, and locked the med room for someone else to open the next morning. I'm still grateful to Marcus for stepping out at that moment. I catch myself remembering the sound of his door handle turning, the small click before it opened. I think about the quiet wait he had when he stood there. If he hadn't woken up, the angle of that hallway would have worked against me. Now I work at a day center with better staffing and stricter safety protocols. We have 2 staff at all times on the floor, radios checked at start of shift, and a clear escalation path when boundaries are crossed. We run drills. We have mirrors for corners and a second exit from the med room. Clients still have rough days, but there is a plan and coverage. When someone gets loud, I don't have to choose between leaving medication unlocked or standing alone in a dead-end hall. The incident with Derek changed how I look at work. It made me choose places that take safety as seriously as care. It made me keep my body in mind when I do my job. I understand that wanting to help people shouldn't put my safety at risk. Sometimes I think about if Marcus had been deep in a delusion that morning, or if he had escalated too. It could have gone bad for both of us. I don't let that thought drag out. I treat it as a reminder to keep procedures tight and to keep lines with supervisors clear. I don't ignore small signs like someone asking if I'm alone. I move when the first boundary gets pushed, not the second. That experience taught me that good intentions and professional dedication aren't enough without proper institutional support and safety measures.